So, intros with video essays are usually pretty odd to kind of get into and figure out precisely what you want to do. I'm going to set that to around 25. I think that should probably be fine. So, the main obstacle right here is what exactly you want to be talking about, how you actually want to go into the hook. Let me get that a little bit lower.
Probably be the most
because I don't want there to be too much overlap in the voices. So yeah, usually what the thing you're going to be looking into is what you actually want to be hooking people into. There's a lot of video essays that I bump into out in the wild where it's all very much like, this is Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter started in 2004 with Monster Hunter 1 on the PlayStation 2, and its controls were kind of weird, but now it got into Monster Hunter. Like, there's some people do kind of like the very kind of history of summation type of thing. So with something this large and this ambitious, there was always going to be the issue of how do you actually hook someone into it. And the general approach that I went into when trying to write the intro, I'm going to be adjusting the volume up and down a good chunk of this, I apologize. So the issue that you're going to run into is, how do I actually want to present this game? Like, what do I want to present from the get-go? And mostly what I leaned into is Monster Hunter World is big, it's popular, it's important, it's controversial, and it's also very commercially successful. So there's it's kind of this kind of cultural touchstone, especially within, I would say within video games in general, but also certainly when it comes to how Monster Hunter operates. You know, even with other games that might typically outsell it, or other games that might be more important on a developmental level, I think it's pretty undeniable that in terms of the direction of the franchise, Worlds probably will forever be the most important one, barring perhaps the one that started it all. But it's pretty hard to get away from how significant World was. And with that is going to come with people that hate it because of the radical direction that it brought about. It's going to bring in a lot of people who absolutely loved it because it's the one that they came in on. You're going to get people who are going to be down on certain changes. You're going to have people who are going to be up on certain changes. And that's kind of more so what I wanted to go into and wanted to establish right from the very beginning with the intro of this essay, is more so that this is a controversial cultural touchstone when it comes to Monster Hunter itself and the games, and kind of set that as the idea going forwards. Is like, this game is gonna have a lot of discussion about it. I mean, we still talk about World and Iceborne a lot. There's people who legitimately do not like this game still. There's people who still swear by this game up and down and all over the place. So that's kind of the point I wanted to hook with. I think we're going to be moving into the thesis section. This is something that I established with the Rise video that I thought would be a good idea to do with any of these big celebration critiques, is go immediately into an idea, or go immediately into this type of idea that right up in the very, very, very front of the video, after we've kind of introduced the game itself, we're going to introduce my opinion on the game in kind of an overall broad sense, without any justification yet. And the purpose of that, I thought, and I stand to, I think is a good idea, is from the very jump, from the get-go, let's establish what I actually think about this game, what I'm going to be aiming to break down, what I'm going to aim to be presenting, so that there's no question going forward in what my intention is going to be. So that was the whole idea behind the thesis statement idea in the Rise video, and I liked enough to keep it over and have it still be something that I work in with this one. So the main thesis statement going into World is that it was, again, kind of what we're talking about in the intro, major touchstone, probably one of the most heavily flawed Monster Hunter games when you really kind of break things down and look at it, but
And it is also
a game with also
very
some
possible
dramatically
that
high
is
highs in
exactly
terms of
the
spectacle, in
change of
terms of
pace that Monster
gameplay.
Hunter needed at exactly the moment it needed it.
We're coming
Allow
into
me to
this part right
elaborate
now,
on
but there was
all of
also a
this.
big
We'll
point
talk about the
of where
specifics of what
world,
issues
how
Monster
world
Hunter
affects
has
Monster
as this
Hunter
video
at the
goes
point in the
on.
timeline
Video is for,
that
but I do
it
think
comes in
world
on,
being
and
first,
whether or not
big,
Monster Hunter World came in at the right time,
mainstream
was the right
Monster
changes
Hunter
at the right time, because
tied
there is a
to
kind
take
of
a little
like
bit from a few valid
before world,
criticisms.
after world, I think
I
is
could,
typically how
and probably will
most
eventually,
people in the
do an
community
entire
kind
video
of
breaking
divvy
down
up
why I
the
believe that
timeline
Monster
of Monster Hunter a little bit.
gameplay formulas in all of video
Because
games.
as we're going to go into in a
Because
little
I
bit, there's
don't
these
want to
massive
break off into a 30-minute
formula shifts
diatribe
and
that could
mechanical shifts that
potentially
you hit in
derail
World
this
specifically
video's
that have
pacing.
carried over
Here's
into
the short
the,
version. Monster Hunter
into the
is
games
generally
afterwards and weren't
very
present in the
good at
games
respecting
beforehand.
your time. The end game
So
can get
there's
a
this
little
question
boring every once in a
of,
while, but typically,
was World
face down a monster,
the right game at
slay
the
that
right
monster,
time?
you get
You know,
rewards
if
on that
you
monster,
get out of
then
Monster
you
Hunter
craft
4
gear
and get out of
that
Monster Hunter
monster. If you
Generations
want
in the
to
4th
increase your chances to
generation,
get specific rewards,
and you
use
stick with the
target
traditional
specific
format,
monsters.
well,
As you
okay,
slay
where do you go?
more
Where are the
monsters, you
ideas
get
from
more
there?
parts and more gear, you gain more knowledge on how to
Would
fight
a
particular monster
hypothetical
without
Monster Hunter
weapon
5
proper.
that
You
stuck with the
gradually
traditional
get
formula,
faster
would that have
you
been
learn the
interesting? Would that have
patterns
gotten
and the sound
tired?
cues and the
Would
weapons
that
and
have
the
been
terrain
something compelling? Would it
While
have
you're gaining that
functioned?
knowledge, you're also
Or
getting
would it
better
not
and better
have?
sets of armor
And one thing I
your
try to go
numbers
into with this
and
video
overall skill
is
sets. And that
part of the reason I
blend
think
of
World
your
probably
own
did come
personal
in at the
skill
right
acquisition
time
and
is
increasing
we're
number
never
of
going to get
gear
an answer
acquisition
to
just
that
kinda
question
loops
in a
and
sense.
loops and
Is
loops. It's enormously
you might be able to make an argument that
incredibly
maybe things got a little bit
That's
long in the tooth with
quintessential
Generations, as
Monster
Generations was
Hunter
very much
formula
a kind of
is
best
so
of
solid, so
grab
ambitious,
bag type of
so
idea.
enjoyable that even major issues
It was
in
this
any
big kind of
individual Monster Hunter
festival,
game, not
best
even
of
just
album
World, can
compilation type of
sometimes
game
be
with a whole
kind
bunch of asset
trivialized by the fact
reuse
that the
and
core of
repurposing
the
and retooling
experience
and
is
remastering.
always
Would a
so
hypothetical Monster Hunter
damn
5 post
good.
that point
And
still
that super
be
solid core
something
was
really interesting and using the
to
classical
most
formula, or do
people
you
that are
have
now
to kind
Monster
of
Hunter
go
fans
in this
via
more overhaul
Monster
type of
Hunter
direction
World. So
to
that
revive,
kind of
to keep the
introduction
franchise going, to keep it
captivated a lot of
interesting?
people,
We're
brought
never
a lot
really
of
going to have a
people
straight
in.
answer
Some of
because
the
the
other
old
stuff
Monster
that's
Hunter games were
problematic
never
World
wholly
kind of
allowed
falls
to
off the
get
wayside.
lame,
Now,
honestly.
I'm not trying
There
to
was
say
never a
that
point of
people who
desperation
love and
where
love
the franchise
World
really
were
felt like it
blind,
needed that
stupid,
major
forced to like
overhaul.
something that was
But at the same
popular.
time,
Nah,
you know,
nothing-
if you
nothing
have
like
a
that. You can
more
like things that are flawed.
big grand
Fine. You can love
compilation
things
type
that
of
are
thing,
flawed. I'm saying that I
is the
understand
writing
why
on the
Monster Hunter
wall
World got
at that
its huge
point?
initial
Or is it not?
applause right when it first came out, despite the fact that it does have problems. And I think it also
Let's
explains why a
see. I
few
think we're
select
running down
people
the thesis
really
right
kinda
now. I
don't
think
like
we'll
World, because they've been around Monster Hunter for a while. They know that World
let
has
it go
its problems,
past.
and they're not so much a fan of the fact that World is the big, famous, popular one, since there are some objectively better put together Monster Hunter games. Now, as for
That
my
was
point
something
that
interesting to
World
consider,
might have been
was
exactly
other
the
people's
soft reboot that
perspectives. There
Monster Hunter
is
did at
a
the time
population
needed. I have to
online
emphasize the word
that
might.
very
The
much
classic
does
formula
not
of
like
Monster
how World
Hunter
operates.
didn't overstay its welcome. It was
Very much does
never
not like how it
allowed
changed
to go
things.
back. We
There's
don't
also a
know
contingent of
if
people who just
Monster Hunter might
don't,
be a classic
who I think they
game,
like the modern
would have
games,
been
but they
a
don't
good
like
or
World. I
bad
think the
thing,
clutch claw is going to be a
because
big
it's
part
just
of
not
that.
happened.
But
It is
I
certainly
do think that there
possible that
is
Monster Hunter
a
5 would
small
have
grab
come
bag
up
of
with
individuals who
some
have that kind of
ideas
chip on
if
their
it was
shoulder
originally
regarding
isolated
World,
battle arena
because
formula
they
that
are,
used to. They pushed the map
you know,
pretty far with how
that World
far
was
the
kind of a
zones were
bridge
between
too
the
far
metro
for
assets
certain
before,
individuals. As
and
much as Monster Hunter
craziness in
changes and
combat
changes and
was
changes
also
and changes
tested
and
pretty
changes,
hard with the
and no
styles
singular
and hunter arts
iteration
introduced
or
in Monster
incarnation
Hunter Generations.
of
Some more good ideas
the
very
games
likely
are
existed in this
similar
format,
remotely.
but
You know, do you kind of hit the
no
point
all-around
where with
bad
what they
or
did to
just
World, is that a
straight-out
bridge too far? For
stagnant
certain people that
ideas
it was. I
weren't
mean,
really
if
allowed
you
to
watch,
manifest
I
either.
think
Old
MH
school
Beatman does a
Monster
good
Hunter added on
job
top,
going over some of
and
this
then
stuff.
14
There
years into the
are
series' run,
places
Monster Hunter
where
decided to
changes in Monster Hunter have been a
itself,
bridge too
put
far for
itself
basically
out
its
there,
entire
big
history. There are
out
people
of modern
who
home consoles and
think
and
have
yeah,
thought things
that
like
would
try
be
changed things
come
too
with
much,
some
4
growth.
changed things
But
too
I'm
much. So
very glad
does
that
that make
Monster Hunter World
World
appeared
really kind
when
of
it did,
anything super
how it
different
did,
due to the fact
and
that it
never
changed around certain things with the skills and with the item usage and with the maps. And the answer is it's always going to come down to who you're asking.
At that second, and I'm glad that we never will. Those old games
I think at this
are
point in the
all
video, we're talking
great.
about
Now, if only Capcom
the
would just
impact that
release
it
a
had
couple
on the
of those old titles
franchise.
just to kind of keep them around and keep them in the market, but that's a whole
And
other
the
video.
actual,
What I
like,
actually made. Monster
change
Hunter World
around
is
in
a
the
game
franchise
with
that this
pretty
game
notable
was.
peaks and valleys. I think this second playthrough really highlighted both to me, even more than the visceral original experience I had with the game when it first came
Sure.
out. And it was being
Okay, I did not mean to mean that.
updated.
I got
During
the wrong buttons up.
second playthrough,
Right,
I
okay,
was
so,
showing a
yeah, I
friend
was
of
talking
mine
about the
who
second playthrough
never
that we
touched Monster
did
Hunter before,
live, the
the
Bone
amount
Boys
of time
playthroughs, and you
I
could.
had to say
This was
something
back
along
before
the
I was
lines of,
recording off of
"Yeah,
OBS
this was
directly.
his
You can tell
stupid
off of the
choice for a
of the
kid
footage quality.
concept.
Yikes!
Don't really know
But
why they
that's
did it
that's
this
super
way. They
condensed, man.
reprised
Downloading
footage
videos off of
kinda
YouTube
have to
directly.
put up with it for
It's a
now.
big reason I
Probably
stopped doing
the
that.
double
Went with like a
digits, but
4K rip
dude,
or just
the
recording
fights and the visuals
automatically
and the
because
music and the
I gotta
natural
tell you, if you're ever doing
environments,
YouTube
monsters,
and you
the set
are
building and the big
downloading
multiplayer
stuff
options,
directly
and all
off of
the
YouTube,
close calls
they're
that
gonna
we had and the big
compress it
triumphs
to
that
hell and
I had
back.
exasperated
Like
one
it
guy.
is some of the stuff on Vodcanic, the video quality is
Blast of
tragic.
Playing this game with my friends and my fans from
But yeah,
top to
talking about
bottom
the second
all the way
playthrough that we
through
did.
was so much fun.
Yeah, I said it right there. Yeah,
This video
incredibly fun that
is gonna
second
get into
playthrough
the
of playing it with the guys, was starting Austin up for the first
We're
time.
gonna
We
try
brought
and
you
be
guys in
objective
eventually. It was a
about how
blast.
mechanics
At the
quality
same
might
time,
be
though,
making
playing
a
it through for the
game
second
affected world overall.
time
Yeah,
did
I'm
really
not
start to show
gonna
the
be
cracks
super
even
nice
more
to this
so
game
than
in
they
a
already
couple
would
of
have
places.
on a first
But I
playthrough. Because at that point, you're kind of
almost
used to it,
there.
and
I
like
have
that
almost
initial
2,000
impact
hours in this
has
game. I have
worn
gotten
off a
to
little bit.
and beaten Fatalis on 2 different
So,
fronts.
you know, you're going into the
I
second playthrough and you're
adore
like,
this
man,
game,
this
and I
game's
want you to
great.
remember that when I'm being mean to it.
This game has
Because I adore it enough to be
problems.
honest
The world,
about it.
there was a
So let's
number
get
of times, I think probably I'd
Now, there's
run
a
off of
lot
fingers of
quality
saying,
life changes.
yeah, I
Major
mean, this
formula
game was really,
overhaul.
really fun and
We're
all this
talking about
stuff,
when
but
discussing
this was kind of a weird thing, and they fixed that
Granted,
thing
a
around
lot
the
of this
world.
stuff is
I feel like that was
not
something we had to talk to Austin about a whole bunch, when Austin would be like,
World
this is
War
fucking
II
stupid, and then we'd be like,
War
yeah,
II
it is a
game
little
is gonna come after
stupid,
that.
but, you know,
as the bringer of the
it
modern
gets better,
era,
or you kind of just have to put up with it. There was a whole lot of that. Some of it's world specific, some of it's Monster Hunter in general, and I'm not gonna put that on world too much. This one is going to be moving into the seamless map section that you get in World. I figured that this was probably going to be the best place to start when talking about how World was going to change the franchise. Tone that down a little bit more. So the reason I started with this when we're actually getting into the game analytics was this was the marketing. You know, the seamless maps, the giant environments, no more loading zones, no nothing like that. That they're all just one giant, more kind of open concept map. That was the major point in the marketing, I think. Or at the very least, it was like top 3. I mean, if you're going for like number one, it was probably like Monster Hunter, but it's coming back and it's on modern consoles at the time with modern graphics and all that kind of stuff. That might have been like the big thing mostly. But I feel like the open environments were probably like thing number 2 or thing number 3 of talking about the big selling point of someone who's coming back to Monster Hunter via World. And it was also a major part of the marketing is, hey, look at these giant environments and these like nice, big, bustling, thriving ecosystems that we're going to flesh out with all these fantasy animals that you can fight with giant swords and whatnot.
They'll just mull about for a little while, won't do anything, a set amount of time elapses.
In this part right here, we're talking a lot about the effect that loading screens have on animal behavior and what the monsters were allowed to do, weren't allowed to do in the older games, and then getting into what they're now allowed to do in World, and what kind of animations that they're allowed to have, and the behaviors that they're allowed to have, the interactions that they're allowed to have, because the whole world has to be under the assumption that it is being viewed at all times, where the older games didn't have to have that. If there wasn't a hunter in a loading zone, then that loading zone was completely and utterly unobserved, and it didn't really matter what was going on in there. Not as much, barring some things like larger monsters hunting if they had to, or just moving in between zones. Mostly they just had their inactive neutral state walking animation. They'd idle around in there for a little bit, and that was about it. With the seamless maps, what you run into is the fact that, well, now everything has to be observable all the time. Everything has to be operating under the assumption that it is observable all the time. So with that, what happens is you have monsters with more idle animations, more things. You see like Kuluyaku's up on screen right now, where he'll do like the thing with the grooming with the feathers. You'll have things like Diablo scratching the horns, and you get into more complex animations and more complex behaviors and stuff like that, where you get now the ability for monsters to move from scene to scene, from level to level, from area to area in a very fluid fashion that you couldn't do in the older games because of the way that loading screens worked, and the fact that, you know, a good chunk of the animations would be completely invisible to players if they weren't there to observe it. So this was kind of the first major point here. A big thing talking about the seamless maps is just kind of how they broadened out the ecology of the environments and of the animals, what they now allow to bring more so into the forefront. And I had a major point more towards the back end of this chunk of the video, where I go into the idea that most of this already existed for Monster Hunter before you even get into this idea of showing it in animations. You know, this stuff for monster abilities and monster behaviors, and how they interacted socially, and how they vied for territory, and how they interacted with that territory, and what they ate, and where they went to the bathroom, and all that kind of stuff. It already existed in the background. It had already been in there. This was something that was in the developer's headspace already. But with how the older games worked, there just wasn't so much of a point for them to actually go into it and elaborate on it and show it. So I did want to kind of refute this point that world and its ecological aspect was very much up its own ass, right? That it was like, oh, like pontificating over the fact that, like, oh, look what we brought to Monster Hunter. Look at this grand ecology thing. Like, aren't we so bold, and aren't we so inventive, and blah, 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 blah. I don't know. This kind of idea that world invented this ecological aspect is like, no, it was always there in subtext and in background and in art books and in all this other information that you can find. You might need translations for most of it, but it is always there. It had already been there. And the advantage that the open maps provided was like, okay, well, now this doesn't have to just be subtext and background information and tertiary reading. Now this can actually be something that we can bring in and that we can show off and we can naturally incorporate into the game, and we can work it into the content using things like the tracking animations and the leaving of materials and certain idle animations and even non-idle animations where the animals are interacting off of one another. And we're going to expand how the boss monster's hunting is going to operate and stuff like that. And like Wilds even goes even more into some of these ideas as well.
To create an experience that instead embraces and shows you those details excitedly.
That was the major point number one I wanted to go into. Yeah, we're going into the ecology cutscenes right here with, like, this is stuff that they used to only... This is a turf war now. Like, this is a turf war in world. Granted, the animation's not quite as long, and they can kind of be a little bit more cinematic and a little bit more experimental with certain things, with a pre-rendered cutscene that doesn't have to operate in engine. But I mean, like, we just have this stuff now functioning and operating, and you, like I said, because looking up here, we're up at this very kind of top cliff precipice area. We're looking down into one zone, which looks down, like, we can see a good, like, 3 or 4 zones. Like, you can even look into the lava caverns if you're looking in the background right there. But yeah, no, you just have Tigrex and Bonboro right now. So if you get into the older Monster Hunter game, they're not even doing like that much. But if you get into the older Monster Hunter games, the two of them would have essentially zero relation to one another. They'd have zero recognition of one another. They'd just be doing their own thing. When you get into World and you get into the fact that, okay, now these animals need to, they've chased themselves off into the same zone, which is hilarious. But you're getting into this idea that, well, okay, now they need to be observable all the time. So now they need to, you have the turf wars, right? But they also need to be standoffish. You know, if they're roaming into the same territory together, they might not necessarily come to blows, but they're going to do the kind of standoff thing where they're going to be roaring at each other and kind of like making motions at one another, trying to intimidate one another, trying to get the other one to back off, and etc., etc. You kind of need to have that now, because otherwise what you're going to have is someone's going to be looking in from a distance, and you're just going to see the monster idling around, not doing anything, no animations, no nothing, and that is going to completely shatter the illusion that this is a functioning environment, that you have these animals who are interacting off of one another, who are learning off of one another, who are building off of one another and have these social structures and social hierarchies. If they have zero recognition of one another, zero recognition with anything, then the illusion gets shattered. The advantage that the older games had was they were able to maintain the illusion extraordinarily well, because you could only ever be observable of one region at once, and it either had an encounter within it or it didn't have an encounter within it. So that's actually something that was very interesting to me to consider when going into this video and actually trying to analyze how the open maps functioned. Is in a certain way, the older Monster Hunter games are actually less limited, if you think about it, than how the newer ones have to be with how their systems operate.
Some of the development time and resources went into all the little bells and whistles could have perhaps gone
He's
into
gonna
something
drink water because there's gonna be a lot of talking today.
Maybe. I ain't gonna act like I have a perfect understanding of major
Right. Yeah. So maintenance of illusion.
World is more showy than classic Monster Hunter. It's more of an experience.
Let's see what I'm talking about right here.
Immersive and grand and awe-inspiring and captivating to the senses. And then you do the awesome fights. The classics are snappier. Yes, you also have cool stuff.
Right. Okay. So this is talking about actual pros and cons and going into whether or not the seamless maps in a more kind of cold analytical sense actually add anything, because you do have all the environmental detailing, which you kind of have to have now, and that's really nice. What actually happens in terms of the gameplay? And to be perfectly honest, as much as I did like the open maps and I did like the, what did I say, like the encapsulation of the senses and all that kind of stuff, and really kind of just kind of diving headlong into this environment, if you're looking at from a more pragmatic gameplay type of sense, really what's happening, I'm sorry if this is going to make any weird noises, I'm just adjusting the microphone, getting a little bit closer to my mouth. Looking at it honestly, the older experience is a lot snappier. It's a lot more expedient, because, well, there's just so much less movement. Like, you know what zone the monster's going to spawn in. You go to the camp, you go there, you mark it with a paintball, you chase it around. Like, the only thing would really be if you have a certain map that's not built particularly well, with a monster that is in a spawn point that is very, very far away from the load-in, and there's not really a lot of natural pathways that get you to that monster spawn point in any snappy kind of fashion. That's probably the only thing that you can really put over the newer games, is that they have some modes of transport, as well as having the camp system. But World kind of wants you to just like take everything in and revel in it, and have you just kind of sit and enjoy the spectacle of the whole experience. And so how do the developers deal with this? They want to kind of create a more experiential type of idea, whereas some of the older games, it very much felt like game. It's not, we're not, like, the experience is there if you really want to sit and just, like, live in it and pay attention to it and look for it. World doesn't really let you look for it as much. I mean, there is some looking into it if you want to go off of the beaten trail and go into the non-combat zones and go looking into those sections. But for the most part, you don't really have that option to go into the immersion, because the immersion's just the entire thing for the most part, honestly. Like, you are going to be fully, like, drenched in this environment. Like, you really kind of can't escape from it. There is none of those gameplay elements. Like, there is that, those loading zones aren't there anymore. You know, the most you get is maybe like a wire bug section here and there where you have to do the inputs, but even there's very rarely a section where, like, you have to do wire bugs to proceed. There's usually, even then, there's still like a vine section to climb, or like legends you can climb and stuff like that. That artificial nature is not there as much, but the advantage of having that artificial nature with the loading zones is, like, you can kind of keep the game is going, right? You know, I'd say there's probably definitely this kind of group of people who might not be up on the fact that, like, oh, we're being, like, more artsy, we're being more stylistic, you know, we're trying to create not just a video game, we're trying to create an experience, you know, trying to be like, I don't know, I don't think World goes like that far. World, I don't think, feels like pretentious about, like, what it wants to do.
And if you find a map that has
I like this bit
design and or a lot of climbing and or monster spawn zones that are particularly far away from base camp, runbacks to a fight on that kind of map after a feint in the classic games can
He's shoving my finger up against my television.
Frustrating. Now, generally, you're not.
Yeah, all my homies hate the Arctic Ridge. I'm sorry, that map is not good. It's just not very good. It might be one of the worst ones I've ever made. Someone has to think that
So, speaking of climbing around,
someone has to think that the maps are that
some
map has to be the worst one.
Wedge beetles.
I got my thoughts crossed for a moment there. There has to be a worse map, and it may very well be the Arctic Ridge. Talking about, right, so this is going into traversal and traversal options to actually get around and deal with the fact that the maps are the size that they are.
Now, the wedge beetles don't completely overrule every singular patch of vines.
Let's see that donation from you, Mr. Dino Dan. Thank you very much. Happy 3rd anniversary for the funniest group in MH YouTube. In all seriousness, your channels helped me in a bleak time in my life, and me earning some amazing friends in this chat because of it. Thank you, Connor. Well, thank you very much. I am glad to entertain and be helpful to those that need it, and provide something that makes the day a little bit easier and a little bit more entertaining. So I'm glad I can provide that for you. So getting back into this, so this is talking a lot about the traversal options. So this is going to go into things like the Tail Raider system. It's going to go into the wedge beetles and the climbing systems. And it's also going to talk a lot about the camps. I think this is the part where I talk about the camps the most. The camps do come back. I think they're also in the quality of life section quite a bit as well. But, oh yeah, this is going to be showcasing the Tail Raider system is just, it really isn't stellar, is it? We've come a long way from this system. Yeah, no, you'd make a whistle, and they're trying to do something immersive with the system, right? They are trying to do, like, oh, this animal that you summoned, he has to smell for tracks, and he has to, like, pick up on the monster's scent and whatnot, and you're like, brother, why am I on the back of this animal and to, like, move faster if he's not going to move faster? Like, what the fuck is the point? You know? It's like, what am I doing? Like, I need to be, I'm on here to move faster, and you're not moving. And the fact that it was completely on rails, I mean, that a little bit of that is forgivable considering the fact that this was tacked on in Iceborne. But yeah, no, this system was not great, was it? It really was not anything fantastic. And now we've gone, I mean, it's kind of funny, we're almost like back to having them on rails again with the Palamute. Or with I'm not gonna. No, don't slander the Palamute. It's the fucking sacred. The Palamute's better than the sacred, Connor. Come on. But yeah, no. So I wanted to talk about the fact that if you have maps that are going to be this size, well, okay, that's going to add to traversal time. Like, that's going to be another thing. Is like, do the hunts get longer due to the fact that there's all this extra traversal time? And there's definitely some of that. The camps help for the most part. There's a couple of maps where I think the camp distribution is not as good as it should have been. Like, the Ancient Forest has some very odd choices. I think the Coral Highlands probably could have used another one. This one, the Wildspire, had good placements. The Eldritch Recess one was fine. I thought the Hoarfrost did a really good job with its camp placement because it had like 6 of them on there. But yeah, no, there's a whole thing of like, I kind of almost wish I went into this a little bit more when I was writing this video. Is like, you also do have to remember there were some maps. Well, I did kind of bring it up, making fun of the Arctic Ridge, but I could have made more of an argument and more of a point of it. I was like, well, let's not forget, right? There's some traversal in the older games that sucks ass. Like, I get the fact that World is a pretty big, pretty chunky game with some pretty big chunky maps, and there can be a lot of running and a lot of tracking around and a whole lot of time spent with that, especially if you don't have an area where you have wire bugs to deal with certain things or climbing sections, or you don't want to deal with the Tail Raider system. But at the same time, you do at least have the warp camps, which can help a lot. And you have some maps in the older games that just, like, the traversal's just not good. There are some maps, some of the older ones especially, from the original game, from first generation, quite linear, honestly, where some zones are like a whole good, like, 4, maybe even 5 loading zones at the minimum away from base camp. So, this honestly, this could have been a point in World's defense a little bit more than it was even made in this video. It's like, well, traversal in some of those older ones wasn't pitch perfect either. You know, I still... part of me still kind of feels like I don't like desert maps in general because of the second generation desert. I'm like, no, but I like most of the desert maps. But for some reason, I have like this kind of like thought in the back of the brain. It's like, no, you don't. These ones they're big and they're tedious and they suck ass and they're boring. I'm like, I think that might just be the second generation one.
But did anyway. And you don't have to go to all these places at all. You can just go exploring for fun. It's cool.
Let me see what I'm doing.
Digging around and trying to find these little secret spots. And the last lovely little benefit from World introducing seamless maps is that
right. Okay, so that was talking about
overdue death of monsters getting stuck in the loading zone.
Oh, we're talking about being stuck in the loading zone? Yeah, I tried to fish for good footage for that. Honestly, I probably should have fought something that was more... I should have deliberately gone back into GU and started trying to fish for stuff like Gravios or Rajang or something like that. It would have been especially really nice if I had my the profile that I used for Freedom Unite footage up and running at that point, because I could have used like the older volcano maps. I have some footage, or at least had, I might not have it anymore, of if you ever played the old volcano, like the MH1 volcano. That map had areas where it's just like there's a rocky outcropping out in the middle of the lava rivers that the hunter has zero access to, and especially Rajang would like to back hop either into the rivers of lava or onto the rocky outcroppings off of it and just sit there and fire laser beams. Gravios did it a whole lot too. And yeah, that's not even so much in the loading zones, but you do get those in the loading zones as well. I mean, everybody's hit those where like, I can't pursue the monster anymore because he's just sitting in the back corner in the loading zone. And there's no way I can hit it anymore, because if I go in for an attack and I overstep even the slightest, then I am just gonna go through the loading zone and like, okay, well now I have to bait the guy out of it and move them around, and okay, let's actually do a melee attack, please. But then they don't do a melee attack for the next 35 seconds. And that's not a problem that exists anymore. Honestly, if you remember from when we were playing World, when the monster goes into the transitionary areas, it was a boon to us more than, like, we had a whole joke about, like, oh, welcome to the hallway, bitch. I bet if you watch those streams, you probably remember pretty well, to be perfectly honest, of, like, you get the monster in the hallway, and then you ragdoll it off of a wall, you set a health booster down so you're not getting knocked out of the health booster, and you just sit in the booster in the hallway with the monster, and we just beat the brakes off of them. And, like, honestly, the monster getting stuck in the loading zone is kind of a benefit sometimes, especially in this game. The health booster especially, because, like, they can't throw you out of it. Like, they bat you into a wall, you're still in the health booster, and you could just caveman the monster at that point. It's so funny.
I believe to be well executed. The details, exploration, and loving artistic craftsmanship have a
right, this is something I didn't even really cover in the commentary section, but yeah, one thing I definitely picked up on, which was kind of something that I was kind of interesting to discover when I was talking about the seamless maps when running through this, is like, oh, I mean, I brought this up a little bit ago. It was like, World can't hide anything in its level design anymore. Like, you lose some aspect of the scope and the scale for sure.
I feel like I have to
but at the same time, quite interestingly, World is actually more limited in its map design and its world building and whatnot, because it's not allowed to hide anything anymore. You can't put anything behind those loading zones and imply distance anymore. You have to show everything. And that was a point that I found, like, I didn't even think of that in my initial playthrough. Like, up until when I started writing this review for the game, I was like, that's interesting, actually. That's really interesting to consider. The fact that, like, you know, you'd think sometimes with newer technologies, like, oh, like, we can now kind of breeze past this issue, that issue, and that issue, and we can breeze through that limitation, we can get around that thing, and that kind of, like, breeds an almost sense of non-creativity because your obstacles are being taken away. But when you get into something like Worlds, you actually have more limitations, because the older games have this advantage where they do not have to have the burden of explaining how their maps work, honestly. You know, like, you get some stuff with background work and some implied upcoming shifts in artwork or tone. You go through a loading zone and it's like, yeah, no, it's completely different. Like, you went such and such amount of distance, and right now it's super different. And honestly, in some cases, in a couple of maps, it can almost be jarring because the tonal shift will happen a little bit too radically, honestly. And World just physically can't do that. World has to show everything, and that led to advantages and disadvantages in the fact that sometimes entire zones of a map will be a little bit more samey due to the fact that they have less distance that they have to work with, and they can just move around a whole lot less. But at the same time, when you get something, say, like the art direction that exists in the Wildspire Waste, or stuff that happens with the Ancient Forest, well, now that's almost actually kind of more impressive than some of the best work than the older games could provide, because you were able to give an experience that was very in-depth, very elaborate, had a lot of diversity to it, was able to communicate a whole bunch of ideas, and you weren't able to hide any of it. You had to show the entire journey.
The map stuff, but still pretty huge. The entire passive skill system got completely.
So this is moving into the skill system. I'm going to take another drink of water, and I'm going to listen to where I am.
To be the defaults. For a quick comparison, in the classic Monster Hunter games, passive skills were granted to you if you could acquire a set amount of points.
Talking about the old armor menu system.
To them if you passed a second, and sometimes
wow, is it better? I make a point of it in the video. This is talking a little bit more about the actual. This was something, you know, honestly, sometimes I write my scripts in a way, it was like, if my parents were like,
further than
going to my like my
grandparents
grandparents or like my aunts or uncles are like, look at this thing that Connor made. I asked this question in my head is like, if my proud parents were to show the relatives what I was making, would my scripts be written in a way where someone who had no idea about anything to do with Monster, would they have any idea what the hell I'm talking about? So going into this section right here, it's like, well, okay, let's probably actually move my chair around a little bit there. Let's probably actually kind of just do a brief little touch up on how the skill system used to work, how the point system worked, how negative skills worked and skill tiers worked, and let's actually introduce things here so that we can set up a point of compare and contrast when talking about how the new skill systems work. I mean, honestly, in terms of just an essay, I think it's probably important to have both anyway, but that is something that does get taken into consideration when I'm writing these scripts. Is like, I don't want to infantilize, but at the same time, I want to take into consideration the fact that, like, all right, well, does this script assume that you just in some points you do have to kind of assume that the people listening to you know what you're talking about, because this was something I was talking about with the intro, is you can't just be like, this is the history of blankety blankety blank, and this is every piece of information that had anything to do with it in this lead up, etc., and so on and so on and so forth. You can't do that. At the same time, you have to set things up in a way and kind of go into something, especially with mechanical analysis. So like, all right, I need to actually kind of set up my point of comparison and my precedent here so that I can actually make an argument and have facts and evidence that I can stand up against one another so that I can actually make a point and not just make a whole bunch of proclamations and assume that the audience is going to agree with me, because I think that's how you get very bad analysis. Honestly, is when you just start making points without thinking of a certain word. It is lost on me. But without any kind of means of backing up what you're going to say. There are some essayists out there that I've observed that, like, they just kind of state things for a fact. And, like, I state things for a fact that I get wrong as well. I try to be very careful about it.
Whatever a specific fight calls for, or whatever I just kind of want to slot in. Sometimes I just like having some comfy skills on hand. Having that
right, okay, so talking about some of the advantages of having the ability to have more skills on the new sets with how they operate now, because obviously there's just way more room, because now you're going with these singular instance values and you're not going off of the numerical system. Honestly, something that would have been really interesting to go into, not that this wasn't a thing in the older Monster Hunter games, but having like investment levels and fall off levels in different skill tiers and how that operates in world, because you can kind of get lured into certain traps of being like, well, do I do I actually want to have this skill maxed out? Like, this is something that we're going into with, say, like Burst in Monster Hunter World, or Monster Hunter Wilds rather, is like, well, do you actually want to have full burst? Because, like, that top initial level is a nice, just raw and elemental buff on top of that. And, like, are you going to start to progressively get less and less for your dollar the more and more you invest into certain skills? That is a thing that exists with tiered skills in the older games, but it's much more a thing that exists now with the multi-tiered skills that you have in this game. Is like, okay, how much is it actually worthwhile to be max investing into certain skills? That could have been something I would have covered even more. Right now we're talking about the UI changes and the menu systems. Yeah, I mean, it's just, this system was not great. It was not set up particularly well. The new blacksmith is just so much better.
And then, once you have a set that you like, you can't even check your overall statistics in any one of those shopping menus, so then you gotta leave the blacksmith again, open up your character stats menu.
I thought this editing was pretty funny, just overlaying menu system on menu system. Because, I mean, this is what it is, right? Because, oh my god, it's just, it's so messy. All the armor pieces are in different menus, and the skills don't have built-in descriptions, and you gotta tab over to the different skills instead of just tapping a button to bring up the skill information. And then you can't even see like what charms you're rocking, what decorations you're rocking. You're just looking at the individual armor pieces. And then you actually got to like go back to the box and see what you actually have for decorations and charms and talismans and that kind of stuff, what you actually have in the box. And you got to go back and forth and out of this menu and into that menu and out of that one. And this one is just like everything is right here. It's organized by columns and it's organized by rows. And everything's right there, and it's all on one singular menu, all 5 pieces of every single set. You can look at how the skills are going to work off of each other, and if you organize them in such and such a way, you're going to be able to see what skills you have and what places and blah, 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 blah.
As well as your own overall statistics. The decorations menu operates.
This was something, especially, I feel like as the more I play older Monster Hunter and have the context of newer Monster Hunter, the more I have progressively come to hate the menu systems in the older one. Like they have only gotten worse with time, as far as I'm concerned. And I was pretty anti them in this video. I can assure you, it's only gotten worse. It's only gotten worse. Oh, I hate the old system so much.
In only like 1 or 2 very easily accessible menus. Now, you might be sitting there with your arms folded and a pout upon your face, saying, Connor, I liked the obtuse skill system of the old Monster Hunter games. There's a greater sense of planning and knowledge and satisfaction derived from the need to keep track of all my individual pieces, making sure that I'm doing the proper...
This was something here's the thing, when I'm really kind of harping on the way the older games used to be, or I would really try to harp on a certain system, I do try to make an effort to understand why someone would like it, right? Why someone would actually enjoy systems that I find flawed. I think with some of the older games with systems like this, especially with the menus that they have for gear working, I can see why somebody would find the older system endearing. I could see why some people would think that, you know, like having to manually track how the old system worked and really kind of learn what they had, what they had access to, and all that stuff would be fun. You know, I think I mentioned it in this video, but there was a point where I went back and played GU for a little while. I'm like, I want to make a set for this. So I actually, I pulled up a note tab in my phone, and in that note tab in my phone, I was writing up, like, well, I want this armor piece, and I want this armor piece, and I want this armor piece, and it's going to give me that much in that one, and that much in that skill, and that much in that skill. I'm going to add those totals up, and that's where I'm going to be, and it's going to have this many slots. Like, I was actually physically writing down in my phone what I was going to need to make this set that I wanted. I'm like, this is kind of fun. You know, sometimes you hit those blockers, you hit those obstacles and whatnot. You're like, this is actually kind of fun. And I won't deny to the people who would enjoy the older menu systems, like, all right, well, if you had fun with it, I can understand the perspective. I'm just saying that, like, man, dude, the menus are just better.
The fun challenge that can be found here is
that's something I try to do just in general with a lot of this stuff, is just trying to make sure that my language is nice and diplomatic. Because I think when you have language that's nice and diplomatic, what you can do is you can you can speak confidently and make assertions and, you know, not try to just kind of cower behind like, oh, this is just an opinion, this is just an opinion. Like, no, you can like be assertive, you can be confident in the takes you have, but at the same point, you can get things wrong or kind of like leave out certain bits of information. And like, I feel like if you're diplomatic in your language, you don't have to be a coward in your language, but you have to be diplomatic in your language. And you go for that, then like people, if you do get things wrong, people are going to be a lot more polite about it. I really try not to have much of a pompous tone when in my writing or in my speaking, as I think even if you are smart enough and right enough to be pompous and be overconfident and to be able to talk down, if you do get to that point, I think your issue that you're going to run into is then from there you're going to be hyper scrutinized, because people are going to want to be waiting for you to get something wrong. And I try not to put myself into that position. You'll notice that I use a lot of very negotiable, very diplomatic language, especially when I am really trying to go hard in on a point. I don't want to be a dickhead about it, and I also don't want to be a coward about it who's just going to be like, this is just my opinion, dude. It's just my opinion. It's just my opinion. Just let me have my opinion. I don't like it when essayists do that. I think it's kind of weak, honestly. So, yeah, usually the tactic I go for is caveats and anecdotes and concessions and a whole bunch of that kind of thing to kind of let someone who would disagree with me know, it's like, no, I get you, but like, here's what I'm bringing to the table. And if I get something wrong, I get something wrong. Like, I've got plenty of things wrong in my work, and the result usually is that when I get something wrong, the people who correct me on things have to correct me on things, usually very polite about it, where I think if you're like abrasive in your confidence, then you kind of hit the point where people start to prey on your downfall a little bit, and I don't want to do that.
Way less than RNG on an individual charm. A god tier charm in a classic game and in Rise and Sunbreak as well.
I think this part we're talking about
really good skill. A lot of points in
the decoration
really
system and the charm system.
Then some extra points towards another good skill, and as well as some open decoration slots. Rolling for a really, really good charm, especially banking on a specific
all right. So this is talking about some of the differences that you find in set building when it comes to this game versus some of the older games. This is the first one that goes from RNG talismans into RNG decorations instead. Not a popular change. Wild irons things out a whole bunch with them, for sure.
Hundreds if you're playing long enough.
The RNG deco system in this game is a little rough. It's a little rough. It is, the distribution is not particularly well done. I know that the more infamous ones are especially attack plus ones, and I think, what is it, Mighty Bow is the other one that is particularly infamous from what information I did. This one I really had to kind of think about, because we're kind of getting into this area, and it'll get brought up a lot. It gets brought up a lot in my channel when looking into this kind of stuff. Is like, I asserted a whole bunch. It's like, I am never someone who's like, oh man, dude, like, I need to get the best numbers. Like, if I'm not getting the best numbers, like, oh my god, what am I doing? And I need to rip apart these game mechanics incessantly until I get my perfect numbers. I need to get the best set possible. That is not me. It's never gonna be me. I do not care. I could not give a shit. But at the same time, like, there are people who do give a shit, and I have to take into consideration that there are people who do give a shit about that kind of thing, and I do need to be, at the very least, honest about the blockings that come in at that level of set building, even if I don't super care. And that was an interesting thing to think about and write for and make concessions for and elaborate. Is like, when you're talking about the RNG decoration systems and the reason why it is flawed and the reasons why some people really wouldn't like it, I think it is the responsibility of myself as an analyst and as a reviewer and as I hesitate to say journalist because that's almost a slur at this point in time, but someone like at that level, you kind of do need to have that level of integrity and like be a kind of voice for people who give a shit about mechanics that you don't necessarily care about. I can tell you, especially in the first playthrough of World and Iceborne, I didn't give a crap about the RNG decorations. Not that much. There would be a couple of points at times like, well, I wish I had this, but like, I don't have this, so we're gonna just do that instead. And like, whatever. What the fuck ever. Who cares?
And foremost, I do not care if it makes I do not care if it builds up a bad habit.
This is going into some of the QOL stuff, but yeah, that was something where myself personally, like, the RNG decoration system is the RNG decoration system. Like, whatever. Who cares? Was it in my head? It's like, is it that different from the talismans? Like, I don't know. This is also probably the first game where I really was looking into like set building as well. No, I wasn't even particularly good at it in World either, but it was the first one where I was like, legitimately any interest in it. But yeah, no, it was something very interesting to write for. Like, I didn't really care. This did not negatively affect my experience, especially in the first playthrough, almost whatsoever. Really, I made do with what I was given. I was given what I was given. I made the sets that I made. I had fun. I was able to beat monsters in perfectly fine times for someone who's at my skill level and at my playability level, which wasn't anything crazy, but like I could do it just fine and had a blast playing the game. But when you get into the analytics, you have to set that aside. You know, you have to set that aside. At least I think you do. I think you have to be a voice for these people who have things that they care about that you don't necessarily care about. Because, I mean, it's just the nature. You have to be analytical about the nature of the game, right? So you don't have to necessarily say, like, I hate this now because I don't think that the set building is the best ever. But, like, well, here's a clear and obvious point of contention when it comes to the set building for such and such a reason, and you have to articulate that.
Being able to do this harms much of anything. Yeah, you can swap to a stronger build mid-fight if you want to, but
so I think we're talking more about the QOL section at this point. We're past the changes that's in the skill system.
Monster matchup you got going on, or you kind of just want to fight this monster with something else in the moment. You're more than free to just go do that.
Right. Okay. So this is going to be talking about some of the conveniences that the camp provides you. There's a lot of quality of life in these games, and this was one where what I needed to think about for this one was quality of life means a whole bunch of different things to different people. Again, this is a point of perspective and whatnot. Some people are going to want there to be as many obstacles as possible. Some people like it when their games are very obtusely designed. They enjoy it when they have a lot of restrictions. They have a lot of limitations where they are put a whole bunch of obstacles in their way to actually do the things that they want to do. Some people really, really like that. Some people don't. Some people, they just want an easy breezy. They want an expedient system that just like, it does what it does what it's supposed to do, and all that stuff, right? So quality of life means a lot of different things to different people.
It also gives the developers some room to make their monsters more complicated.
And people are going to have different takes on it. Again, we're going for more of an analytical type of thing here. So the question is, well, okay, they made a change. What does that change domino effect into? Like, what? That's kind of the thing. What actually happens in a broader sense beyond just the change that occurs? So, of course, in here we are talking about things like being able to eat out on a hunt, being able to go and restock while out on a hunt, being able to swap your gear around while out on a hunt, a bunch of stuff like that. A lot of changes and alterations and minimalizations in the pre-hunt prep work, and shifting a lot of stuff being able to be done out in the field. Excuse me real quick.
Camp for an extra couple of seconds to get that rectified. You can also eat a second time at camp to get some extra buffs.
A little bit of phlegm build up in the throat right there. I apologize. But yeah, so this was something where I had to look at the games and be like, all right, what does this do? A big thing that I found was a lot of these.
I don't know if I like being able to stack food skills.
A lot of these really kind of set up a good chunk of elements of forgiveness. One thing I do definitely think happened is a lot of changes were made for the sake of the expeditions. Item restocking especially, I think kind of had to do, at least somewhat had to do with the expeditions. I can't say I can wholly chalk it up to being a thing having to do with the expeditions, but if you're gonna have these effectively these game modes where you're doing these endless hunt-a-thons where you can just stick out in the environments and go and go and go and go and go and go and go, well, if you're not gonna have any kind of restocking, well then you're gonna bump into like a little bit of a problem here where like a dude's only really gonna be able to do maybe like 2 hunts or something like that. And then he's gonna need to just go gathering for new materials. Yeah, there's Odia Bataras. So I had a feeling with like their big new open maps and everything, and as the expedition system, and eventually like what they were going to do with the guiding lands for the end game, I had a feeling that they were going to be like, that they probably thought somewhere along the lines of, well, we're probably going to need to implement a system where you can actually do item restocking and gear switching so that, you know, you can actually make use of these systems. Otherwise, you're just going to do investigations and nothing but investigations. You know, what would be the point otherwise, honestly?
Of course, in the midst of a pitched battle, the tension and danger and threat still exists for sure in World and Iceborne. World is not a game that is devoid.
Alright, so this is getting into item restocking. Item restocking, I think, is probably the most damaging bit of quality of life that we've received. Again, this one is loaded up with a whole bunch of anecdotes, right? Of like, well, thinking about it, you still die because a monster can trap you in a combo, even with the fact that you can restock. Like, it's not like you're getting hit and then healing and then hit and then healing and then hit and then healing, and then you like break off in the middle of the fight, go back to camp, and get all your mega potions back, and you go back for it, right? I don't think a lot of people actually do that. I think in execution and in practice, I don't believe there's a whole lot of people who's like the second that they're running out of mega potions, they are boop, they're off to camp, they're going to get more mega potions, and they're nabbing them and coming back. It's usually, if you do go to camp to restock, it is almost always between intervals where the monster is changing zones. And you also get introduced to both the guiding lands and expeditions. Yeah, no, it's usually stuff like that. But at the same time, the major point that I went at is just this complete and utter erosion of fear that you have. It's like playing Frontier at that, because at that point, I was playing a lot of Frontier on stream. There's a lot of very intense moments where, like, you have 10 potions, you have 10 mega potions, you have enough combines to make another batch of 10, you got maxes, maybe you brought life powders.
When you consume an item, you can still move around and even
excuse me.
heavily reduced speed. At any time,
but once you're done, that's kind of it. You might be able to gather for another herb and honey somewhere, but are you really going to do that? Probably not. Like, once you're done, like, you're done. You're out of materials. But in World, hypothetically, you are never out of materials, and you have just a bottomless stockpile that you can operate from. And that was the point that I really did have to concede. It was like, well, you have this hypothetical bottomless pit of materials. If you really wanted to get it instantaneously, you do have Farcasters in the game. The erosion that can potentially do to tension, I think, is actually a bit damaging.
And I doubt that you would then stop and flex your muscles upon completion of the potion in front of the dragon's face. And if you're about to go into my comments and type,
we're talking about, all right, so this is going to be a big one. So this whole point, going over, let's say, the action economy of item usage, I talk about it in the script. This is a mid-development addition that was added onto this section a good chunk of the way into production of the video, well past the point where the quality of life bit had been written. I had gone in, changed around the structures and changed around the segues and a whole bunch of other stuff so that I could fit this bit in.
The next one's nice and simple, sharpening while your weapon is drawn.
Because there was more to talk about than I had initially presented. A whole bunch of talking about how item usage in mid-hunt got affected came from a conversation with a friend, my buddy Core. And he was talking about one of the main issues that he was kind of having with World and then not having with the other games, and then had to kind of like go around and really kind of figure it out what kind of issue he was having. And he utilized the term action economy, which was interesting to me because if you use the term action economy, you usually hear it in a context related to D&D, where the term is essentially
Meaning that with some items, there was always a chance that
the amount of in D&D terms, it's the amount of stuff that you can do in your turn, like the amount of attacks you can use, the amount of like say of like a bonus action, a reaction, an item usage, and all that kind of stuff.
There's no skill or challenge or difficulty to the system. It just randomly doesn't yeah, sure, you could eliminate this by holding items in your inventory called
Lost my
combo
train of
books,
thought,
but
sorry.
these then clogged up your inventory, and what am I running around flipping through a cookbook in the middle of a volcano trying to
Oh yeah, talking about item combining books. Never liked those things. They always item combination books felt like they came from a different game. They really did. They felt like they came from an RPG where you had a combo skill that you could raise. It was very odd to me.
Speaking of item management and combination,
right, talking about the action economy type of stuff. That was a whole conversation where
loved it. You had to hold down a button,
a
whole bunch of times to scroll through your inventory horizontally until you find the item that you wanted. Can't say it was god awful. It was responsive. The scrolling was pretty fast. It's kind of limited.
Yeah, the comparison between sheathing the weapon and then you pop open the item menu and then you have to scroll over to the item that you want while the monster's still trying to fight you, and then you scroll over. You have to stop. You have to find an opening. You then take the healing item or whatever. And then you stop and you flex and you get all the health back in one instant, right? Whereas with Worlds, you have the radial wheel to get to your items more quickly. But at the same time, you also have the ability to move around while taking items and stuff like that. I will say one thing I'm never going to change my opinion on. Being able to sharpen with your weapon out was a great idea. It is just a sensible idea. The notion of stopping in the middle of the hunt, putting my weapon away, scrolling over to a whetstone, getting to a safe spot, pulling my weapon back out, sharpening it, and then putting my weapon back away, then getting back into the fight to take the weapon that I sharpened back out again. Stupid. I have always thought it was ridiculous. That is one thing, you can, too fast of an action economy, sure, talk about it all day. The way that old whetstones worked, I hated the way that old whetstones worked. There's a whole bunch of stuff talking about the QOL in these changes. There's a whole bunch of it where these really, I really didn't get like a retroactive opinion shift. There wasn't a whole lot of like, I needed to justify my purchase for the new Monster Hunter game, and I need to like blind myself to its issues and be like, well, no. I in fact, old game was bad. Like, don't you remember? Like, old game was bad. And this is why I am allowed to defend new game, is because old game was actually bad. There's a whole bunch of stuff where, like, I really didn't mind this change, that change, and the other change, because I've been playing these games for 8 years. Before World existed, before I knew that they could get better. And I thought they were fucking annoying 5, 6, 7 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. I thought they were obnoxious. There was stuff like, I've always thought the flexing animation was a little corny. I get that's the point. It is corny. I understand. Man, it's not sensible in the slightest. And like the way the old whetstones work, like that's stupid. That's actually dumb. There's some stuff with like some of the old traversal too. It's like I had problems with the old traversal before I knew that world existed. I very much wanted to be careful, and I think I did a good job of getting around it, of being like, am I actually like inventing problems for the older games to justify the fact that I want to present Iceborne as good? Or are these actual things that are like, well, yeah, this did make the situation a good bit easier, but is it easier because, like, the game is neutered? Or is it easier because the old way of doing things was legitimately cumbersome and annoying? And there is some stuff where I'm like, no, I think the old Monster Hunter games were legitimately annoying in a couple of places. I mean, I made a really, really big stink about the blacksmith menu systems in the older games. I'm like, I stand by that. I've always thought that system was pretty bad. Like, I don't particularly care that, like, my set building is a whole lot easier and I have just, like, a quick menu tab over here and over here that I can get to actually, like, look at the sets that I'm building. I'm like, dude, I'm building a set, man. Like, I should be able to have, shouldn't be doing the game's paperwork for it. Like, I should have this paperwork and these, sheets in front of me. So that was something to be looking at with the QOL section a whole bunch. Like, I want to make sure that I'm not just saying, but old game was bad though, so you have to like the new game because old game was bad though. Like, no. Let's actually think about this, right? Let's actually go into what's happening, what changed, what used to be there, how is it different. Again, I will leave the concession where if you like the obstacles, awesome, you like the obstacles. I kind of like the obstacles at times, but there were times even before I knew that world existed where, like, I'm a little sick of this game shit right now with something like a Freedom Unite or a Try or a 4 back before 5th generation ever existed. I'm like, I'm a little sick of your shit right now, older Monster Hunter. So I wanted to make sure that balance existed, because at the same time, you know, I think like some of the restocking is a pretty big issue with how just completely and utterly easy it is.
Modern monsters at their best
I was like, you know, at the same point, it's like, yeah, no, I mean, like,
their more prolonged combos grant them
okay, is that too much? Yeah, that might be too much.
To punish your careless item usage. The downside is that even with these changes, it can be very difficult for monsters to properly compensate for your extra movement if they
So we're still talking about it right here. Yeah,
attack.
so this is kind of going back. I kind of transitioned off the topic a little bit. I think I kind of tangented off of the topic a little bit, but talking about the action economy thing is it gets especially with the radial wheel and then the
even though their move pools are significantly broader than those of the classic
moving around with item usage, it has progressively become more and more difficult for the newer monsters to be able to item punish, where, dude, sometimes the item punishing in the older games is crazy. Like, you can watch a monster do a whole, do the startup for one attack animation, bait it so that it definitely misses, start to heal, and then they'll be out of that attack animation fully recovered and in the process of another attack animation that you cannot dodge before you're able to actually kind of properly get back into the swing of things. Whereas with the newer games, you kind of hit a different issue where, like, well, now I can move around and even do kind of like a light jog while I'm healing. Sometimes the monsters are having a legitimate issue being able to heal punish. Honestly, that's kind of why I like Volcana as much as I do. Because I felt like Volcana was a very effective heal punisher. I think that's part of the reason why some people really don't like Volcanas, because Volcana is a very effective heal punisher. There's a couple of monsters in the newer games, especially you do kind of have to get into the higher tier thresholds where they are effective heal punishers, but they are more few and far between than they used to be. I think you kind of have to admit to that fact, that they are more few and far between, that it is progressively partially, honestly, part of that is the action economy, like my buddy pointed out, and I wanted to give him credit when talking about that. The other thing is just, like, I think some of the newer monsters are a little bit slower. I think especially something I would like to talk about in maybe a future video is going into the fact that rage speed modifiers kind of don't exist as much anymore, especially not to the capacity that they used to. And that's a big reason why a good chunk of the cast in the older games could be very, very threatening, is like rage speed modifiers, where if a monster was in rage, they'd be recovering from out of their attack animations incredibly quickly, and they'd be able to get on your ass in prolonged healing animations pretty effectively, unless you baited a really good attack for it.
But one of the major reasons I really like Sunbreak is that more or less its entire roster got some universal speed.
Got up early today. It is starting to catch up to me.
To their versions in the base
Hopefully I'm not yawning all over the place too much.
There's some
I think we're doing fine now.
But the monsters that start slow really kind of just stay slow. Is the classic system perfect, though? No. I have stated and continue to agree with the fact that I think some of the difficulty of the classics came from the fact that the old item system is weirdly and obtusely designed. I'm pretty confident in holding that opinion, as there were multiple times throughout the 8 or so years between me starting Monster Hunter and the time World came out where I thought that the old item management system worked against me. This is not a retroactive opinion. Frantic item scrolling.
Yep, so this is stuff I was just talking about. I don't really need to reiterate this too much, otherwise I'm repeating myself for a third time.
Item combinations were a hassle to access.
I really did want to give this its fair shake, as I was saying that this was retroactively added back in. This would have been...
may certainly be due to poor timing on
I think I mentioned him by name. This would have been after high rank Zoshia was added to Wilds. I think this initially this QOL section probably would have been written in mid-February. Oh yeah, I got this off. I had to get this off of some guy because he's doing like he's getting animation heel locked by old Tigrex. Because Tigrex at rage speed, especially with his charges, they recovered so quickly. Like if you had to heal against him, I don't know, good luck, dude. I was able to get it off fine. That guy was getting thrashed. Maybe he's just worse at the game than I am.
Adding an extra layer of time consumption
sometimes in classic. Yeah, but I wanted to go back. I wanted to give this section much more of its due because the in the initial drafting, talking about the item management systems was very glazed over by comparison. There was not a lot of depth gone into it, and like especially after the action economy conversation I had with my buddy, I was like, no, there's more to say here. There's more to do to compare how the older games worked and how the newer games worked and what problems were in both of them and what strengths and advantages. I landed on the fact that, like, neither of them are perfect. And I don't give a shit if that's kind of a fence-sitting type of thing. I don't care if I have to kind of both sides a little bit. I was like, no, I have legitimate mechanical grievances with how both of them are manned and operated. I'll get into a point in a little bit, but there is some stuff I like with the newer stuff, with the fact that there is a little bit better dance maintenance.
You need to pick your moment to disengage. You need to pick your moment to sheathe. You need to
I think we're going to get into like the Dark Souls comparison in a second here.
And that can kind of just
so that point, talking about the fact that if, especially I guess with rate, okay. Fun fact with this footage, this is saved. I saved a couple of my boss battles from this would be my second playthrough of the original Dark Souls.
To heal in that game.
I played it at a buddy's house. It was my very, very first playthrough of the original Dark Souls. Was playing it at my friend's house because he introduced it to me for the first time. I got the trilogy, and then I was like, I gotta go back through DS1 completely because one, I adored the game, and two, I didn't get the chance to finish it at his house. So I'm like, I gotta finish it. So there was a couple of boss fights where I was like, man, I'm super proud of how I beat him, or I'm just like, I'm happy that I beat this boss. I got some of these on Elden Ring as well. And like, I'm just gonna save these, and I'm just gonna hold them. Because I want to have them. So I'm like, I had a point of comparison. It was like, I actually really like how healing in Dark Souls works. Because you also are in a pitched fight where like the enemy is attacking and attacking and attacking and attacking and attacking. With gaps in between for certain like end lag on certain animations and whatnot. So you have to pick your battles and you have to pick where you heal and whatnot. But with Dark Souls, you never have to put the weapon away. So there's never a disengage action into a sheathing action, into an item selection action, into a healing action, into a reposition action, into an unsheathing action, and then you reassume a combat. Because that is the thing that I would bump into with the older games. It can be a little bit faster than it sounds like, but it is a whole bunch of choice, and like a whole bunch of them are very, very unsafe.
for less disengagement for the
to
battle,
actually try to
thus keeping
engage
the
with.
combat flowing with
And
very
this can
few
kind of
true
drag you
submissions.
outside
You're scrambling
of
up
the
and
actual
expecting
boss
an
battle.
opportunity for several seconds. The animation
And I think that is
access
something
modeling
that Monster
feel
Hunter
more
World can
true
kind
to
of rectify a
actual
good bit, because
human
like, well, now I can
decisions.
just
I can only
I
go
can
so far
disengage,
as an
yeah,
argument, though. You know,
but
you have to
since
have
it's tougher for
some
them to heal punish because I can move
limitations
around,
to realism, I understand
well,
that.
now
And
you're cutting
there's
into a
less
little
time
bit
where you're
less of my
scouring
decision
around
making and a
for
little bit
weapons
less
to
of
use
my
because of the radial menu.
time
You're not
elapsed
just
out
getting
of
square
combat.
over
I
and
can
over
get
and
myself
over
back
again
into the
to
fray
get
a
to the
whole
thing
lot
that you want.
quicker
If the developers
and
were more
whatnot. But
willing
at
to
the
give
same
the modern
point, you know,
monsters
you are losing some challenge and you are losing some difficulty from having to make less of these challenges. I'm like, I really like the healing system in Dark Souls, because it is a little bit of a best of both worlds, where like I'm not being disengaged all that much because I don't have to put away my weapon, but at the same time I do have to pick my battles a little bit better.
Also, I'm still gonna say this: the item combination success and failure percentages were always stupid, and I'm never defending that. Okay, thanks for bearing with me through that little.
All right, so we're coming to the end of the QOL section again, talking about the combo rates. Never like the combo rates. Maybe somebody does. They're an odd individual to me if they like the combo rates. I always thought they belonged to a different game. It was very, very strange to me. Never loved the combo books, because like now the combo books just take up my item space. Sheesh, I am more tired than I thought I was.
So it is what it is.
I usually get up
so
relatively
now we're
early
gonna go
today.
back to the other quality of life changes that World brought to Monster Hunter. You now also have infinite stamina for sprinting when you're
Right, okay, so this part is a little bit more kind of rapid fiery.
And very long corridors and hallways to trek through. They also added in omnidirectional rolling to the game rather than four-directional rolling.
Omnidirectional rolling. Omnidirectional rolling. Lovely. Love that. Being able to roll backwards. It's so nice. This has been something where, like, I've been playing a whole bunch of 3U recently, because I've been working on 3U for some stuff for the laggy video and whatnot. I was able to borrow it off of a buddy on his 3DS.
Now, the Hunter's Notes gives you some
There's so much stuff from like, why can't I roll backwards? Why can't I roll backwards? I'm like, please just let me roll backwards. It's literally the only thing that would be safe right now. I'm like, the game's like, that doesn't exist, Connor. Fuck you. You should be back hopping with a lance if you want to roll backwards, you idiot. Like, no, come on. Omnidirectional rolling was so nice, so nice. It's just like it feels like you have more proper control of your character. It's just more responsive that way, honestly. Talking about the Hunter's Notes definitely get better in this game. Rise and Sunbreak still have the best one for sure, even better than Wilds, because unfortunately Wilds did some regression in that area, which sucked, but this is different. I mean, if any of you started out with some of the older games, you definitely probably remember needed to go onto like third-party websites and whatnot to go information hunting, to look up like, what is the monster weak to, what are their hit zone values, what are the part drop rates, because none of that stuff is in the older games. None of that stuff is in the older games. Could it be better? I mean, like, the star system isn't great. It really doesn't tell you anything. But at the same time, is like, at least it's information. And also due to the fact that World blended the village storyline quests and multiplayer hub quests. This is talking a little bit about the multiplayer scaling. This is something I'd like to talk about later on this year, is actually talking about how the scaling operates and some of the mechanisms around that. I don't want to go into that too depth just yet, but that might be a video we'll work on this year, really kind of talking about some game design aspects related to it. Again, this has to be... So if you couldn't, or oh yeah, no, there's people there. So this would have totally been footage ripped from a live stream, and it just gets poor footage gets compressed to all hell. 2 players, or 3 to 4 players. Good change here as well. Makes G rank, now renamed Master Rank, significantly more single player friendly. If players drop in or out, the monster scaling will shift in real time. Yeah, so this is talking about just like the scaling thing in general, and also the drop in, drop out nature of the quest structure. Both of those I really liked. It made... You can get a really good challenge off of Guild G rank in some of the older games. Like, it can be very satisfying to beat some of those very difficult quests. At the same time, the scaling, it was something that was like, as soon as I learned how scaling worked in the older games, I'm like, that just doesn't make sense. Granted, there might be some of the games where, like, there could be technological limitations and whatnot, like, they really kind of can't create those more dynamic instances. Maybe they just kind of can't do that, where, like, a quest can have shifting values based on members. I don't know. That might be something interesting from just a program engineering perspective. Maybe they just kind of couldn't. But that doesn't mean I have to like the fact that there was the multiplayer scaling.
Lobbies if you go looking. I just don't like the flare. It's a shame too because they
oh yeah, the SOS flare. I never loved the SOS flare. I don't think that's a particularly fun mechanic.
Of people and hunting teams coming
It de-incentivizes going to the multiplayer.
It makes the hunters gathering hubs feel lively and active, like a functioning location that several hunting teams can operate out of at the same time. When you get a filled lobby with 12 to 16 people, it's cool to see all the different armor sets and hop between the groups. It's
yeah, so talking about...
They removed the gunner armor class from the game in world entirely. For those of you who don't know, in the old games, just about every armor set had a gunner.
Some leftover stock images. Well, I say stock images, but that's definitely recycled images that was just saved in my camera roll after the Carapacian video. I'm like, I have armor saved up in here. Let me just use those. That's funny because you just pop out Shogun Senator armor for like, why Shogun armor? It's like, well, I had the images. I do miss gunner sets though. I think a lot of people miss gunner sets. Unfortunately though, man, I don't know. Getting rid of gunner sets was probably the single healthiest thing for the poke guns. Like now I don't need to make 2 sets for everything. I just make a set of armor.
To work with if you really want them. The game also will track the total amount of materials that you need for everything on the wish list. For example, if you want
wish listing also a goated. Yeah, I mean they just made set building so much more doable in this game, so much more manageable in this game. This is like if you want to make a set, all right, let's give you some tools to actually work with you here, because it's just the game actively argues with you in some of the older titles. Is like, no, 17 menus. Look at all of them separately. Fuck you. And then the modern ones are just like, yeah, you want to make a set? Sick. Let's make a set, buddy. It's gonna be annoying with some of the RNG elements, but like we can do it. We can do it.
There's also a ton of excellent and needed menu adjustments and simplifications that drastically improve the process of set making. There's a couple places where I think these changes were a bit too forgiving, for sure, but honestly, I think
we're winding down the QOL section right here.
Next up, we're going to move away from World's major overhauls to Monster Hunter itself and move into World and Iceborne's unique tools and gimmicks. Let's cover the mantle system first.
Alright, yeah, so this is where we're going to be talking about...
In some cases,
this I think is going to be the bulk of the rest of part 1 of this review, is actually going into the unique mechanics that World had. And I wanted to do them... I'm kind of forgetting exactly what the basis for the ordering was. I knew for a fact that Clutch Claw was going to have to be last. That I knew for matter of fact.
Also tied to the same equipment slots are these
at the same time, though, I don't know if I necessarily had... Mantles I felt like made sense to be the starting thing. I mean, mantles were big in for the first things that they advertised about the gimmicks, and I feel like it was probably like the first big gimmick change was the hunting mantles. Probably, yeah. It was probably the first major thing that they showed off in the marketing in terms of like, these are the new things that you're going to be doing. Yeah, no, you got the ghillie mantle. It's like right up in front of the marketing.
All 5 elements have mantles.
I didn't figure out what I really thought about the mantles, right? Because the mantles...
And then as
The mantles are okay. I feel like I'm very neutral on the mantles. Some of them are legitimately interesting from a gameplay perspective in what they bring to the table. I think some of the blight-proof mantles have a lot of really fun extra gimmicks that they have on top of them. Like the paralysis negation on the Thunder one, the increased dragon attack on the Dragon one, the current resistance on the Water one. I'm like, okay, so there's some legitimately interesting ability play off of this one. That's really cool. And then you have some things like you have the evasion mantle, which is just free adrenaline rush. I think this is before adrenaline rush existed too. Like, that was fun to play around with. The glider mantle, I think the glider mantle turned out to be like one of the best ones in the game, if for nothing else than just like pure slottage and uptime. Glider mantle was fun. It's one of those, I didn't play around with it nearly as much as I should have. But I mean, you kind of can't get around the fact that Rocksteady and Temporal were as powerful as they were. And as we're going to get into later on, we're talking about these mechanics, the Clutch Claw really just made them worse. But even in base worlds, I mean, Temporal was just like, here's 6 hits you don't need to worry about anymore. And then Rocksteady at least had like some give and take and some bait and punish and whatnot and all that type of stuff. But like, at the same time, you can kind of just no-sell. It's especially easy if you have a health regen augment. And you can kind of just not care. I think Iceborne especially made the Rocksteady obnoxiously powerful with health regen augments and how the Clutch Claw operated. And how the Clutch Claw operated in tandem with the Rocksteady mantle. But some of them were a lot of fun.
I use the Temporal Mantle a ton. At its best, though, I think the Mantle system is a creative batch of extra tools that offers you some alternative playstyles and potent defensive options.
They were at their best, I would say, when they were experimental in creating a new playstyle. And that's why I should have played on it. I wish I played with the Glider Mantle more. I really didn't start to kind of noodle around with the Glider Mantle until I was actually doing research for this, because right, you're watching me like I'm running dual blades. This is a shitty dual blade set to be running against Pink Wrathi because it's poison dual blades. But I'm like, fuck it, whatever. I'm having fun with it, like doing the mounting attacks and whatnot. And the fact that what has it got? Like, I think it has like 2 3s on it for its slottage. I'm like, this is just fun. This is just fun to use. I should have used it more. I always thought like it was just like an interaction-based mantle. Like, it really wasn't. It was pretty combatively viable. Talking about the cat tools.
Check out their mini upgrade tree that makes your Palico more effective as you play the game.
I had to go in and actually research what all of these did.
With the Vigor Wasp healing. Your cat has basically 2 different ways to heal you for a really, really good chunk.
I had to go figure out what all of these cat issues like even actually.
In Master Rank, he can actually give you a free revive.
Sorry. I had to actually go in and figure out like what all of them did. I have to look for like the song tables for the hunting horn cats.
Honestly, I think
the healing one is just super convenient. I had to brush up on all of these, which was fun to do. I had done pretty much all of them in my initial world playthrough. I think in the secondary one, I just ran like the coral horn with me the entire time, like dual hunting horns.
That you could be using instead. If you pick
I think that's the only one I really leveled up, though. You know, the healing one will always eventually get leveled up. Oh, trying to get the Meowcano footage was a pain in the neck. Honestly, if I kept going, I probably could have got a really good one. But at a certain point, I was like, this is just getting annoying to try and get. I really wanted to get it on the topple on that Black Diablos right there, like throw it into the wall and like, all right, perfect opportunity to throw it into the Meowcano. Like, I got a couple of hits right there, but at the same time, I was like, that's not really what I'm looking for, buddy. Whatever.
My personal favorite is the Orchestra. It's nice to get a small collection of decent but not too overpowered.
Orchestra is the personal favorite. Is that still true?
Free flinches can be incredibly helpful in a tight
Probably.
I
yeah.
ran on my cat for the majority of my second playthrough, and having 2 hunting horns for the price of 1 was really useful, but didn't feel particularly.
Is there anything else super interesting to talk about with the cat gadgets?
Original playthrough of World, and yeah, the Vigor Wasp is super convenient. It made my HUDless gameplay not absolute garbage for this video. I do think that as a whole, it's a really fun system that offers a lot of helpful extra tools. I can sometimes overlook the companion abilities in Monster Hunter, but I enjoyed leveling.
That is a fair point. I do often overlook the companion abilities. I'm like,
and one extra mechanic to tack onto this section is the
I'm sure there's a whole bunch of layers in there, and some of the stuff like GU and Freedom Unite and 4 and stuff that I just like, man, I just don't look into this. I kind of just let the cat do whatever. The best thing the cat can do for me is make it easier for me to heal because the monster's trying to beat the crap out of it, honestly. That's the best thing that you can do for me sometimes. And this was probably the first game I was like, all right, well, let's actually like look at what these abilities do and what's necessarily useful here. I've got to a point where I mostly just run a whole bunch of paralysis on my companions.
Leveling them up as helpers is a neat little bit of busy work that will very naturally and unobtrusively progress as you play. Like the mantles, there's just one really effective
I continue to talk more, but this is a very sensitive microphone, so it's probably very quiet
super
for me while
neat
I'm
abilities,
standing.
and I would definitely recommend toying around with this mechanic more if you haven't already. Next up, I'm going to talk about the Slinger. Now, this bad boy,
all right, talking about the Slinger before we're talking about the Clutch Claw.
The Slinger is a super nice.
The Slinger is the much nicer little brother. I actually grew to very much enjoy the Slinger as I was playing World. I felt that the Slinger, it was a very naturally incorporated hunting multi-tool. As far as I was concerned, like, it could do a whole bunch of stuff, but it couldn't do it, like, that much better than the old game. It was a little bit more snappy. It's a little bit crisper. It's a little bit cleaner than, like, hand-chucking the flash pods or the sonic bombs or anything like that, but, like, it wasn't, like, that much crazier. Honestly, the only thing that was really crazy is just, like, the radius and the peripheral vision needed for flash bombs to be able to impact monsters. That it's flat. Honestly, it was Flash itself got tremendously buffed, more so than like the flash delivery system was overhauled so much. If you had a gripe with how that operates, it's much more like how the actual flash bombs worked. But like, I really like the Slinger.
And there's things like thorn pods, which can be lodged in a monster and inflict.
It's continued to develop pretty all right with wilds as well, with the fact that like you can knock ammo off of monsters from like part breaks and battle damage and stuff like that. I think that's pretty cool.
They can be applied on top of naturally gathered Slinger ammo and won't replace it. The Slinger also serves.
They're also able to just kind of like work into the combat a good bit. This was one where I had to go into. I get comments all the time. It's like, man, I love your content, but your gameplay, yikes, man. Like, I know. I play all the weapons wrong. I'm sorry. I'm not making an effort to improve. I'm sorry. But this was one where I had to actually go in and be like, how does this weapon work exactly? Like, how do I actually, like, what Slinger options am I being provided with the attacks in this game? Honestly, it wasn't even all of them, but there was a whole bunch of like, yikes! I don't actually know exactly how some of the mechanics work with the Slinger and how it works in a combat and whatnot. Let me actually like, go in and figure out how 1000% some of this actually works.
A healthy chunk of the weapon roster received new unique attacks and attributes tied directly to the Slinger. For some weapons, like the Greatsword and the Hammer, Slinger Burst attacks can be used to shorten the wind-up of certain combos or charge attacks, while also having a decent chance of flinching a monster. Alternatively, the Dual Blades and Switch Axe can use Slinger Burst attacks to perform evasive dodge maneuvers. Still, other weapons like the gun.
Right, an overarching point that not only do they just work in the Slinger to be a bit of a multi-tool, but as a combat device, it is multifaceted. I really just don't have anything super negative to say about the Slinger, honestly. I really don't.
It makes the Slinger feel less like a novel little accessory and more like a thought-out part of the game. Even if I forget about that aspect a lot, I'm a big fan of this little device. Though not every weapon got a new attack utilizing it, it's a convenient, multifaceted.
I don't think I have anything too much more to say about the Slinger beyond just a general appreciation for it. But this was probably the first time I really sat and like, I like the Slinger when I was writing the scripts. It was something that just kind of wasn't said aloud in general. And I think the Clutch Claw and its perception can kind of impact how some people reflect on the Slinger, but like just kind of by itself as it was, how it impacted a whole bunch of weapons and gave them either like new extensions or new evasive techniques or new attacks or whatnot. I'm like, no, this was good. This was legitimately really good.
That is very important. Oh, sure, it can be a lot of fun.
All right, this is the Clutch Claw.
Very needy, very demanding.
The Clutch Claw.
Insists upon itself. But at the same time, I'm not someone who's
trying to remember
of Clutch Claw bad.
Man, maybe I won't be hanging out after this, after the commentary's done for too long. I am fucking sleepy. Holy crap.
Of the Slinger and said,
I'm trying to remember what exactly my opinion was on the Clutch Claw before writing.
So,
it definitely went down after writing when I really, the more I learned about how this tool operates, the less I liked it, to be perfectly honest with you. I think that's probably a big thing for a lot of people, to be honest, but this was one where I was like, man, what do I think about this tool? Because it's, I mean, it's interesting, right? Like you're creating artificial weak points on a monster to temporarily give it, to give another one better hit zones. The downside being that, like,
combat as described in the previous section. This is why the gun lance is classified as a light.
I think I lost my train of thought right
Slinger
there.
ammo after a tenderizing attack. It needs that fuel to utilize its Wormstake blast ability. You do have to.
Man,
be
I am
careful,
tired.
though.
I did not know how tired I was going to be for this. I feel like I'm doing all right. Hope you guys are enjoying this, by the way. I hope this is relatively entertaining as background audio. I was hoping that this would be a fun idea. I am enjoying myself, but I'm only sitting in my chair and I was like, oh, geez. But let's see. Yeah, no, there had to be a lot of research going into.
Like this up to 3 times, and after that third turn, it will
not even so much a ton of research. I knew how good chunk of how the Clutch Claw operated at this point. There, I had to get my script corroborated because this was probably the one where I was like, I need to get this right. So I actually sent this to. I sent the written version of this part of the script to my buddy Zevris. I sent it out to him to be like, hey, buddy, I need to make sure that I'm getting all this information right, as this might be maybe the most analytically important aspect of the entire thing. I really probably shouldn't be getting aspects wrong, because it is a major point of Iceborne specifically, and it is also one of the most cited bits amongst people who don't like World and Iceborne, of like, this is one of the big things for them of being against this game, is how the Clutch Claw operates. And it wounds me a little bit, because I talk about this a bit and talking about, you know, your diplomatic language and try to actually concede to people who have a different take from you. Clutch Claw is like something I really do want to like, but I couldn't get away from the issues and how it was designed as I was writing this. I could see where they were coming from with the Clutch Claw. I knew what they wanted it to be, but I believe they drastically underestimated the Rocksteady Mantle and the Temporal Mantle. Or at the very least, they underestimated how much that people were going to use those. Because now you have a system where, like, you have to be clinging onto a monster part to get a weak point to open up the better hit zones. It's probably your #1 way to get Wex to even work in this game with how hit zones are changed around. So it's like, you kind of have to do this now, but at the same time, you have these two devices where you can effectively just no-sell entire monster moves, because what they want you to do is do a kind of bait and punish type of thing. We're like, oh, Rathian is doing a tail whip. If Rathian is doing a tail whip, then that means there's no active hitbox on Rathian's head. So if I see the windup for the tail whip, I'm going to Clutch Claw onto the head, because that means that I have, like, the ready, set, go to just grapple on and do my grappling attack and then hop off, and now I've exposed the head as a more full weak point while she was preoccupied. That is absolutely what they wanted and what they thought people were going to be doing. Rocksteady and Temporal were were too powerful, honestly. It was just like, well, I need this, and this opened up, so I'm just going to chuck this on. I'm going to hop on here, attack here, hop on here, attack here, hop on here, attack here. With the monsters attacking, I don't really give a fuck. I can just tear them all open. Doesn't really matter to me particularly. And then I'm done, and I have all my weak points, and by this point, the temporal mantle is mostly gone, but, I mean, I did what I needed it to do with it anyway, so who really cares? And you couldn't quite get around that fact in the writing, and then you also have, you know, your baked-in procedures that they had with the turning and the wall throwing. Because, again, I'm betting that they wanted to create a super fun experience with the wall throwing. It was like, yeah, you can wrangle the monsters and get up on their head and slam them into each other and throw them into walls. That's why Austin likes ice. Every time we talk about Clutch Claw, Austin's like, I miss Clutch Claw. I loved the Clutch Claw. I liked being able to throw monsters into walls and throw monsters into other monsters. I'm like, I get it, buddy. I really do. I like that part a lot. It's super fun. Man, that tool had a lot of other gigantic problems that wasn't the throwing. And even the throwing almost kind of was a little bit of an issue because they had to do countermeasures. Because they had to do countermeasures, that just skyrocketed up Agitator. And because of the fact that you skyrocketed up the need to have Agitator, well then, that also kind of means that you're getting a little bit of like build bottlenecking. Because, well, now you kind of really need to be building into Agitator. So you're either looking for maybe like 1 or 2 pieces of Bracky pieces on certain sets. Typically what you're looking for is like 2 Pace Fatalis and then the rare 5 Agitator Charm, and then you're finding like 2 other Agi that goes on 4 slots, and then that's a good chunkier build that you're just like locked in on. And that is
since the hit
pretty, it's not quite universal, but it's on a lot of shit. It's on a lot of shit.
Could not have done otherwise. Not only did the developers make the monster's regular hit zones worse,
and then, you know, of course, if you're getting all those bonuses, you're getting automatic Agitator, well then, there's almost this feeling of like, well, why wouldn't I bring Rocksteady, and why wouldn't I bring Temporal? Because, like, I gotta guarantee that I'm gonna get Agitator off rip, and then maintain Agitator for as much as possible, so, like, I might as well be able to no-sell all attacks and just automatically guarantee that I'm gonna get my free Agitator proc, instead of needing to do necessarily any work for it. So this was stuff that I just had to like peel back the layers and the layers and the layers and the layers of like, what are the cascading ramifications of this? Because it very much feels like this was a very fun developer vision of having a monster wrangling tool where you have to bait and punish and be patient and nab these opportunities manually, and like, all right, well now we can kind of wrangle up the monster and we can toss it around and chuck it around and weaken it up, and it's this next like new level of dimension and interactivity that you can have, and then just like it's this thing that you kind of bump into with certain bits of like mechanic, especially not even so much power creep but mechanic creep, where like, well now you have to have abilities that have built-in resiliences against other abilities so that like they don't cross-pollinate and they don't get into each other's face and they don't start to like slam into one another. World and Iceborne definitely have this issue. I think it is probably the game with the most cannibalistic gameplay mechanics built into them for a Monster Hunter game, where it's just like they really just do the cascading ramifications and just slamming into one another, and the bottlenecking of certain options to make good on really, really solid other options. I'm like, you're kind of eat a little bit into the theory crafting and the gameplay stylistic choices and whatnot by having the Clutch Claw be so important. So this was something I really, really wanted to hammer home, because I know there's a lot of people who love this game and love the Clutch Claw, but again, we're talking about diplomatic language and actually kind of communicating a point with some level of authority. There was this idea in the script like, I really need to hammer home, I really need it to ring true that there is a legitimate issue backed behind how this thing operates.
maximize agitator.
Like, I need to spell it out for you so you can understand that there's very legitimate reasons why someone would not like this at all.
Wearing a maxed out agitator charm and then slotting in the last 2 levels of agitator.
Yeah, I'm going into the set building stuff right now. It was kind of a fun thought experiment, honestly, going into this. And as much as it could be a little disheartening to learn all the issues that existed with the Clutch Claw, it was a very, very fun bit of analytics of looking at like a mechanical cascade.
Open up a hunt by slapping
and just trying to like observe and sit back and take a look at how the mechanics actually melded off of one another, because they can't exist in a vacuum independently from one another. They have to bounce off of one another at some point to some degree. If they have any kind of overlapping general function, you have to take a look at that when you're going into assessment. And it was a it was one of my favorite parts of the script to write, was this section, was for those specific purposes. I did get one or 2 comments that got a little bit mad at me that I laid into the Clutch Claw so hard for the damage it can do to optimal or near optimal play styles.
You have to admit that
to those people, just like, you have to keep watching the video, man. I was like, I am trying to be also on your side right here and give you some legitimacy.
Basically for free. You can recognize,
but man, I have problems.
Some degree of build and combat strangulation, right? You can understand why someone would be burnt
I think
out
this
of
is
the
just reiterating what I was a good chunk of what
I
I was just talking about.
Extremely repetitive and easy way to very quickly maximize its output in a robotically simple process. You can understand why some people think this thing is super intrusive, demanding, and attention-grabbing, yeah? You can understand that some people are peeved that the developers nerfed a bunch of numbers to railroad you into using this thing. I think the Clutch Claw is a...
Oh, right. I used AT-Velkhana's theme for this bit. I think for
really fun tool spread.
What did I use? I used Valhazak's theme for the mantles because I thought that was funny, because he's in like a mantle of like carrion corpses, which is additionally funny because I forgot to include Valhazak's theme in the music section. I got comments back on part 3. I was like, what happened to Valhazak's theme? Like, fuck, I missed it. God damn it. It was funny because I forgot about the arena themes. And I guess this is just going to be a tradition. I'm going to miss like one major song per game, apparently, because I missed the arena themes in Rise. I'm like, I'm not going to miss the arena themes this time when I'm doing the music in the music section. Like, I'm not going to miss the arena music again. And then I missed a whole ass boss theme. But yeah, no, I think I put AT-Velkhana's theme in this section, as this was like the big Iceborne mechanic was for this one.
Like Monster Hunter, and you can always have the choice to participate or not.
Yeah, this is the part where I had to like do a whole bunch of caveats talking to, because like the argument was going to pop up in the comment section, and it did once or twice. Thankfully, though, the majority of the comments actually listened to the video.
Monster Hunter with me on stream for the first time recently,
because
certainly didn't play in that.
You're always when you get a game like this and someone has complaints about how the optimization functions or any kind of build bottlenecking or the game having a meta, there's always going to be the counter argument of like, you can't escape a meta in a game like this, and that can ring true in certain respects and in certain circumsituations. I am sleepy. In certain circumcisions. In certain situations, it is unavoidable, and you can like imprison yourself in your own obsession with playing Number Hunter instead of playing Monster Hunter. Like, that is very legitimate. At the same time, the Clutch Claw issues, I think, went deeper, and it really warranted, I think, the amount of scrutiny that I put it under in this video. It's probably one of my bits of analysis that I'm the most proud of.
I see the logic.
Though there's some stuff with the guiding lands as well that I am also very happy with how I broke down.
I think that to a certain degree, if you enslave yourself to the most viable option and or simple option, some of your lack of fun.
I'll let me take it over because I do really like how I phrase it.
I find that there are specific issues with the Clutch Claw and the things surrounding it that exacerbates the existence of gameplay optimization issues in a game like Monster Hunter. And I think this
right,
is
that was an
biggest issue with
overarching
Monster
point that,
Hunter
like,
World on
it's
an
not even so much that there
objective
is a
level.
meta issue, it's that the
Comfort
Clutch Claw
that
makes the meta issue
safest
worse.
options
I think was
within these
the
gimmicks and
that was
mechanic
that was the
systems allow
ultimate
for
conclusion I was kind of
stacks
coming
way
to when I was
too
writing
well
this.
with
Is
one
like,
another. I'm not opposed to there being
because
new gimmicks
I
in
was talking
Monster
about it
Hunter.
earlier with the
It's
RNG
great that
decorations.
the
Like, do I
series
really care
likes
about
to
the
evolve
RNG
and not
decorations?
repeat itself too
Not
much.
really.
I don't
Not
want this
that
to be
much.
like
Like, I'm
COD,
clearing
where
monsters
every
just
single
fine.
game is the
It's not
I
super
like
fast. It's
pretty
like
much every
12,
single
15 minutes,
Monster
but like,
Hunter
I don't give a
gimmick,
fuck.
at
I'm here
least
to
in a
I
vacuum.
want the
The
monster to be
World
able to
and
do its
Iceborne
moves.
ones
I want to
too.
interact. I
I
want to
have
have the
very
battle
good
be a
things
little
to
bit
say
longer. That's
about
fine with
all
me.
of the
Whatever. Who
gimmicks in
cares?
World and Iceborne
With
individually,
this one, I was
but
like,
this
well,
game has like 4 or 5 of them
the Clutch
put
Claw,
together.
unfortunately,
I
just
don't
kind of makes it
think
worse,
needed
honestly.
that many. And I'm sure the developers understood how they worked in tandem to some extent. They made the game and play tested it. But I think some oversights and overtly bad choices, like the hit zone nerfs especially, created some issues that resulted in more railroading towards the gimmick than most Monster Hunter games usually deal with. And that sucks for a game like Monster Hunter, which prides itself on having a ton of available and customizable playstyles. And it sucks for a game like World and Iceborne that has one of the biggest arrays of biggest playstyles and customization abilities. And things like the gadgets, the mantles, the slinger, and the clutch claw were supposed to, and
I don't know what else I
100%
would want to go
can
into in
broaden
this section that's
those
not just
playstyle
reiteration of the
That is
point.
typically how
This goes
play.
along a
On
little bit long, just due to the fact that I had a whole bunch to say about it. There is a little bit of me where I'm like, do I belabor the point a bit too much in this section going into it? Because I feel there was one comment I got, is like, I kind of think you might be protesting a little bit too much in this particular section when you're going into some of the issues with the clutch claw. Like, you're projecting a little bit here. I'm like, I don't think so. At the same time, there might be some legitimate idea behind the idea that
practice getting some damage increases with iframes off of
I don't know, I might be
Calico
like
is
leaning
using
a
the portal
little
to buff my stats
a little
bit.
heavy into
While
like
I'm using some, I don't know, roughshod lance build.
well,
that I
hey,
slapped
make
together
sure
in
you're
an
looking at
hour.
the
That's
flaws
a
of this
lot
thing.
Fun for me. I generally really enjoy playing World and Iceborne because it lets me do really cool like that. And there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that that is what the developers intended. How I play World is probably pretty close to how they hoped people were going to play it, but that doesn't mean that there aren't these fundamental issues in how the game is designed, and I have to be honest about that. Now, my biggest issue with World on a subjective level...
Okay, we're winding down
totally
the section. I
slap
can
on
move to the next one,
Weapon
because I'm a little bit,
I
think I'm
know,
at
being
a...
very daring
actually talking
and
about
bold for this game.
going
I'm
into
a
the
real
writing for this one.
trendsetter here. These designs don't actually affect the game on a
Yeah,
gameplay
I had
level.
0 point to
Come
put
on,
the
dude. They
layered
look
weapon
awful.
stuff.
They tried going for like a realism thing where you're actually
I really like it didn't fit in the
attacking monster
QOL.
parts with bone and iron weapons.
I guess it
There's
could have
this
fit in like
theory
the
that
etc
you were
stuff at
supposed
the
to build
end.
these weapons into the more
But
fantastic designs that Monster Hunter is known for, but they just never finished.
I don't know.
It
It just didn't really
rectify that
fit
issue in
anywhere, so
Iceborne
I
either.
decided
A
to
lot
just
of
kind of
weapons
make a
just
gag
straight
out
up
of them.
ignored this
It's
idea
like
completely. It was a dumbass,
my biggest
stupid
objective
idea.
dislikes,
So
my
stupid
biggest
that they
dislikes from an
actually have to
objective and a
affirm
subjective
that
level.
This wasn't gonna be an issue in WoW.
Look
Yeah,
how
I
fucking
don't know.
sick
I
this
didn't
killer-
have
this
anywhere
was
else in the
fun.
script to bitch about how bad the horrible
And
slap on
boop.
weapons look. They weren't
And
getting into
dead.
their own time
That was
stamp,
really
and
fun.
This
That was fun
a
to get
pretty
live and
heavy
record
section,
that.
so I kind of wanted to just end this with a joke. All right, we're gonna swap into the end game stuff. We're gonna talk about tempered monsters next. All right, cool.
All right, tempered monsters.
So, the tempered monsters.
Man, do I have
are
anything
what's
to
going
say
make
about
up
what
the
I had
bulk
to say
of
about
your
tempered
endgame in
monsters?
both base
This
game
is another
world
section I
and
almost
in
feel I can
Iceborne.
kind of just let it rock,
Thing
because
about
like,
tempered monsters
man,
is
what do you even say about
that,
tempered monsters?
well,
Honestly,
they're
there's really
It's
just
too mid to have a super strong.
yeah, thankfully I kind of just go
I
through
trust
this
them having
section pretty
function
quick. There
a
really is
little
the biggest
while
thing
further.
is just
The
kind of
only
like their own
real
separate
difference
materials that you get in the
between
guiding
tempered
lands
monster
is
and a
the
regular
bulk of
monster
it.
is that the
I went
tempered
looking
versions
into
are
the numerical
a little
levels
bit darker,
for a
gains
good
attack
number of
increase,
them.
and its maximum health is buffed by about
I think it's
15 to
really just
20%
health and attack
depending on the
buffs.
monster and the quest type. That's about it. That's tempered monsters, at least on a mechanical level. They don't have a damage point minigame. There's no scaling quest system.
There's just so
there's
many
no
better
new
ones.
moves or
Like the anomaly
abilities,
system is
just,
much better.
Noticeable, but
I think
not
even like the
really
hyper
heinous
system is
or
better. The frenzied ones
I
are
mean,
obviously
at least
better.
it's not an
I don't
over-designed
love the
system. I
hypered
don't
ones,
hate
but at
some
least the
breaking
hypered
up
ones
requests,
have
but
like
that
some
system
odd
has a
attack
ton of
timings to
little
throw
basic
you off and
mechanics
whatnot.
that
At least
resulted
it's
in a bit
like
of a pacing
interesting.
issue with the end game
Tempered
overall
monsters
on
are
that
just
one.
so
The most
nothing in this
interesting
game.
thing about the tempered monsters
Wilds does
is
make them
probably
better
the
for unfortunately.
Tempered monster
I feel that they're
really
just,
good
they're
for
literally
finding
just like
decorations,
slightly
which
bigger
gives them
health
solid
pools.
utility as individual quest targets. Tempered monsters also grant you important materials for endgame charm and weapon upgrades. And
That was probably the most annoying part right there, is the
weapon augments. They also drop their materials and decorations in fairly generous quantities, so it's nice that you're not really getting nickeled and dimed by each tempered monster individually. The most important thing to know is that
the
tempered
brain
monsters
fog getting me
operate
pretty
on
bad
three
with that
different tiers,
one.
sorted by monster difficulty. And there's a couple of monsters at the very, very
I'm
bottom
still
of the
coherent
difficulty
by
that
the
don't
time
have
this
tempered
is
forms in
over.
the slightest. We'll call them
I don't think we
like
have too
tier
much longer
0
in this,
monsters.
actually.
The tier 3 monsters
It's,
drop the best
what, it's
upgrade
2 hours
materials
and
and
40
decorations.
minutes?
So you're going to be fighting
An hour and
predominantly
56,
Elder
okay.
Dragons and Elder Dragon level
I was
monsters
like, I don't want
like
to fucking
Double
fall
Zord
asleep
Day.
on in the middle of
Basically,
writing
during
this,
the
but like, I
endgame
really don't have anything.
grind.
I don't have
suppose
anything to
the
go into like
worst
the
thing
development
about this
purposes
system
behind going
is
into the
that
tempered
tier
monsters.
3
Like, there's
monsters are just
nothing
so
to
much
say
more
about
valuable
them in this
individually
game.
that you're going to be fighting the lower rungs of the roster very infrequently, which results in a lot of the early to mid-game monsters being particularly underutilized in the end of Iceborne. I said
That would be an
earlier,
issue, yeah.
but
There is
the
a kind of a
nicest thing about
lacking
tempered
amount
monsters is that the
of
progression
incentive to
doesn't
go
scale.
backwards.
The
Like,
scaling that they do have
Wilds
is
and
not
Sunbreak
horrible.
both do
So
better
in
with
order to get the
back hunting
really nice
incentive.
weapon augment materials, you
World
don't have to min-max
really
if you don't want to.
doesn't.
You might get like, say, 13 and 15 minute clear times with only a decent set, but that's not the end of the world. It's a perfectly okay, pretty inoffensive, enormously simple endgame loop. You fight the really cool monsters in World and Iceborne, but they're a little stronger. I'd say their damage stats are a bit more comparable to those of old Monster Hunter games, perhaps. I think that they're
I don't even know if that's
the most
necessarily true. That
middle
point,
of
like
line,
the damage
perfectly
increases are
okay
comparable.
monster endgame system that
I'd have
they've
to actually
ever
look at
done,
those. I don't have
though
hard
it's also
numerical
definitely
information
the
for that.
least mechanically interesting of all the amped up monster endgames that I've ever seen. I suppose this is a good enough time
Yeah,
to talk
I'd have to
about the
agree.
arch-tempered
I mean,
monsters. They're not
I don't know
as
how.
baked into the endgame as
Honestly,
the
Wilds
standard
might put the
ones. These are
tempered
kind of just
system
endgame
over
challenge super bosses.
the
Some of these guys are
hyper
kinda neat,
system at this
most of them
point
are
for
kinda
me,
lame.
maybe.
The arch-tempered
Hardcore
Elder
is
Dragons
probably
are
still the best
super
one.
endgame post-launch
OG Frenzied is
challenge
probably
fights that
second
could
best.
reward you with some very
Anomaly.
powerful gamma armor
And then
sets.
probably
The
and
gamma
then
sets
probably
are
like
pretty
Wilds
straightforward.
tempered,
You fight the
and
monster, say,
then
like 5 times, you get a good armor set out of them. There's no never-ending.
Then
loop.
hyper.
Though the AT monsters can reliably drop some of the
Then
endgame
probably
level
World
upgrade
tempered.
materials, so there's some reason to go back and fight them more than just their armor. The majority of these arch-tempered monsters are basically master rank statistics on Elder Dragons that are fought in high rank, or super amped stats on
those are the
master
beginnings of
rank
the
Elder
AT
Dragons.
system, which
Sometimes
really
the monster
wasn't
would
much
get
of
an attack
anything
or have
besides
its
like
passive ability amplified, but
2
for
or
the
3
most
of them,
part, they're
honestly.
really super tanky,
Again,
hard-hitting
there's
monsters that you've
it's very
already
interesting
been fighting
having
a
the
ton
Wilds
of
perspective at
times.
this
Now,
point,
when
since
they
its high
actually
rank is
bothered to
basically
change
done,
up the arch-tempered
and just
fights,
how
they
much
made
has
them pretty good.
changed
AT Zora Magdaros
with some of the ideas that were brought out of Iceborne and into Wilds, because there's a whole bunch of stuff in there, especially talking about the tempered monsters. Like, my opinion on this has gone up, but like it can't for this game specifically, because it's a very much a prototype in a couple of ways. I don't know, like this game is more and less of a simulation than I thought it was going to be.
And yet still very fair form of what was already an excellent fight. And AT-Volcanic is
I think I just said some nonsense stuff from the fucking brain fog.
Perfectly matches the top speed that hunters have access to in Iceborne.
I don't even know what exactly I just said. I just felt myself like flawless. Yikes, this is a little messy, huh? It sucks. I apologize if this is a little. I think I'm doing fine throughout, but I'm catching myself in a couple of places being like, the sleepiness is hitting me, and I'm just like, I think I'm saying words that don't make sense.
Are just kind of basically nothing burger inflated
Ah,
fights,
well.
and AT Kashala
If
is
90% of it
one
is good, that's still
the most
good.
atrocious things in the entire game. It's so annoying that players would just spam flash pods so that he would stay on the ground.
Oh yeah, talking
So
about how
the
AT
developers
Kashala
decided to
basically
just
ruined
ruin
flash
flash
pods in this game.
forever.
They
Thanks,
just
Dick.
they made them
Sticking
so
with
bad.
The endgame content of Iceborne. Let's talk about the Guiding Lands. We'll touch on the weapon augment system a bit.
All right,
as
Guiding
well.
Lands I
It's
really
more
liked
intrinsically
looking at this
I'll
one
talk
as
about the
well,
map
and
itself in more
this
depth
one
later,
will
but
bring up a
long story
lot
short,
of
the
compare and
Guiding Lands is a
contrasts
gigantic
with
hunting ground composed of the
Sunbreak.
biomes of every single other map in the game. So naturally, you can fight just about every monster here.
Which I
One
almost feel
big,
like, I almost felt like when I was
endless
writing it, I was like,
hunting
is
ground
that
where you and your
fair
buddies
or
can
not?
relentlessly
Because
slaughter
Sunbreak
animals
didn't
to your
exist
heart's
before
content.
then.
There's very
But at the
little
same
need
time,
to
it's like,
go
well, let's
up to
actually
another.
like look at a system that I
Guiding
think
Lands
does a
is
lot
sort
of
expansion the expedition quests you
world's
have access to
ideas
since
a whole
the
lot
game
better
world.
and
These are
executes them on
also
a whole lot
endless
better
subathon quests
to
with no
actually
set
kind of
goal,
make a
I've
greater
bound to
point
time
and
parameters,
elaborate
but
on
they're
why
suppressed
I
in
think the
individual maps
system
and map's respective
that
features. The
is
Guiding Lands
presented
is a
here
giant
is
melting pot
not
version of the same
particularly
concept. The main draw
good.
here is that monsters will drop and can be carved.
At the same
from
time, though, I
unique materials
do,
that are used for the
I do
augment
kind of
system,
wonder
as
if
well as some other
I
stuff like layered armor sets.
went
The
too
Guiding
deep
Lands are
into a
pretty
system
nice
that
about
didn't
handing these
technically
unique drops
exist
over to you
yet.
as well.
Now, this section, I wanted to
Heart
talk
rates and wall
exclusively
throws,
about the
shinies,
mechanics and
guiding
how it
materials,
interacted with the
and
endgame.
cards will grant
Wanted to
you
evade the
these
map
as
as much as
well. What's
possible,
also
and the
nice
monsters
is
as
that
much
the
as
melter will
possible,
allow you to
obviously,
convert some Guiding
as
Lands
that
parts
was
into
for later
others if you have
sections.
access of one
And
and
really
not
just kind of
enough
talk
another.
about
This mechanic comes in handy because
the
you're
options
predominantly
that the
going to be
Guiding
finding
Lands
tempered
provided
monsters
you,
in
and
Guiding
the
Lands.
kind of
Tempered and non-tempered
factory
monsters
system that the
each
Guiding
have their
Lands
own
provided
materials, and since
to
you're
allow
going
you
to
to
want
turn
focus
certain
tempered
parts into
monsters
other
for better
parts,
rewards, the melter
and
provides you
turn
with a way to
those
downscale
parts
some of your materials
into
non-tempered
lures to
versions
get
that
out
you
specific
sell,
monsters to get
or
specific
into the
parts,
parts
and
of
et cetera,
lower
et cetera,
tier
et cetera,
monsters.
and how kind of
Basically,
like
the developers
factory-oriented
know that you're going
the
to want to
system
focus
kind of
fire on the
operated,
Elder Dragons in the gameplay, so
which
they
was
give
kind
you
of
tools
nice
to
just
turn
because you
their
could find ways
materials
to make it
into
more
lower level
expedient.
stuff,
You know, like the
since you'll
more
be
you
farming
played the
lower
Guiding
tier
Lands,
monsters
the
along
more
with
you
us.
actually
Do
were
bear
able to
in
control
mind
the
that you
Guiding
need
Lands,
to have
which I thought
attained
was something
materials
kind of
at least
interesting,
once
is
to
you
unlock
start
the
out with
ability
it in
to
a way
melt
that
for
it's
it.
very
So even
wild
if
and
you're
very
going to be
untamed
focusing on hunting
and very
tempered
kind of
Elder
all
Dragons,
over the place,
should
but the
make
more
an
you play it,
attempt
the
to
more you
hunt
can
the
kind of
tempered
actually
and non-tempered
wrangle it and
version of
master it.
every monster
But
at
you
least
can't,
once. The
what I
Guiding
couldn't get
Lands
around,
has
what
a
there's
bit
no
of an
getting
odd
around
setup. It
is
makes
the
grinding for specific monsters a little bit of a
hyper-specific and
hassle.
hyper-repetitive
Every region has
pricings
its own level that
on
goes from 1 to
augments
7.
on
The more
weapons,
monsters you slay or
unfortunately,
resources you gather in a specific
which
zone, the
is,
higher
I
that level
mention
in
and make
that
a lot of
region
mention
is
of the
going
kind
to
of like
increase, and other
melting
regions
pot
are going to
system
start to
that
decrease in
Sunbreak
level.
and
You can
Wilds will
have
be
up
getting
to
into
3
using
areas at a maximum
to
of level 7,
get
and the
around
rest
these
will all be
issues.
settling at level 1 if that's the case. Thankfully, the game seems coded to recognize which 3 areas you're prioritizing and won't let the upgraded levels interfere with each other's progress all that much.
Yeah,
So
and then
the
there's
issue
the
here is
whole,
that
like,
you,
the
the
level system
individual,
thing,
can only have access
which
to 3
I
biomes
get
of top-tier
why it
monsters at a
exists, but at the
time.
same
This
time,
was absolutely developed to encourage
man, they
teamwork.
are
Basically,
really
you work with other
banking on the
hunters
fact
who
that
have
you are
prioritized
doing this with the
leveling biomes
minimum
that you
of
haven't
one
leveled, and
friend,
you hunt
aren't they?
together to get all the materials that everyone needs. Now, I certainly don't mind there being structures in Monster Hunter that encourage.
That's how I did it
multiplayer.
with. That's how I did it
enjoy
with
things
Nate.
like siege
Honestly,
and
is like we
rampages
just
for
like
that reason,
swapped
but
which
I
zones we
find the
had,
point
and
of an
you have this
all-monster
one, I
hunter
take
farm
that one, you have
super
this
map
one, I
is a
take
bit
that one,
diminished when it puts this
and
heavy
then
restriction
Nate
on
used
what
me
you
for
can
moley
and can't
harvesting
hunt at
for the
what
most
time.
part.
Those restrictions get way worse.
We
if
wasted
you're
a lot of
playing by
hours going for
yourself.
moleys
If you
that
don't have at least one
I don't even
consistent
know.
hunting
He
buddy
got
with
them all
opposite
eventually.
biomes leveled, you're going to have to waste time resetting your levels to farm materials
I
from a
don't know if
monster
he has
that can
everything
only be
in
found in a
Wilds
zone
yet,
that you don't
endemic
hunt in.
life-wise.
This was especially obnoxious when Iceborne first
That is
came
like
out.
one of my
But
main
thankfully,
Guiding
there's
Lands
been a list of
memories.
features at
Is
release
like,
that
Connor, I
have
don't have this
updates
moley
that
yet. You
have
have
made
your
searching for more specific
Dwarfrost
monsters
Reach
a bit
system up. I'm
easier.
like,
First of all,
sure.
you can through hunting
Yeah,
and
sure.
earn
You
lures
can go
for
moley
certain
hunting while there's a
monsters. If
berry
you
off
don't
trying
want
to kill
rely
us,
on
Nate.
RNG in the Guiding Lands to give you the monster that you need, you can meld for an item that will force spawn that monster. You can spawn any monster.
Yeah, so we're
long
gonna be
as you have
talking a
lure
whole bunch
for it,
about,
even
like,
if
how
the
the
biome
actual
is at
luring
too
system
low a level
works.
to typically spawn that monster. However, if the biome is at a
Let's
high
see.
enough level to spawn the tempered version of the monster, it will be the
I
tempered
really just
version
kind of do
that
like the
spawns
phrasing of
instead
the.
the
I don't
normal
necessarily
one. This
didn't
is the
come to any
cleanest
kind
and
of
most consistent
grand
way to hunt the
conclusions
monsters
or
that
make
you
any
need
big
to hunt for
discoveries
to get
about the
the upgrade
game.
materials
When I
that
was
you
looking at the
want.
Guiding Lands
Lures aren't
analytically,
even
I think I was
particularly
mostly just
expensive
very, very
either.
satisfied
Just by
with my
participating in Guiding
phrasing.
Lands hunts, you'll get a
This was
ton
all
of
stuff
these
I
dragon
felt
meat
and had
spirit
known
bones. You can toss those into the
prior and
melter by the
beforehand
bucketful
and all
make
that
a
kind of
whole
stuff.
bunch
But
of
for the most
lures.
part, it
You'll
was.
also earn a lot of
I
random
really
lures
just kind of
by
like how I
hunting,
said
tracking,
this.
and
I like
playing the game
my
out in the Guiding Lands.
phrasing here.
The only thing that makes this system not 100% convenient is that you need to have the regions at specific levels if you want tempered monsters to show up and drop their specific parts. You also have some limited
Let's
ability
see.
to manually manipulate the levels of your Guiding Land zones. If you have your Guiding Lands biomes at levels that you want to keep them at and you don't want to have
I
to
do
keep
think what you
rebalancing
kind of
them over and
happens,
over
the
again,
reason
you
why
can
it is
lock
fair
your
to bring
levels in
Sunbreak
place.
up
If
in the
you ever need to
conversation
bring
here
down one zone in order to hunt
is
a lower tier
it
monster or build another biome
it
up
really
easier,
does,
you
I
can
think,
manually
highlight
decrease
where the
level of any
flaw,
biome
where
at
the
any time.
flaws
You can't
in this
manually
system are
increase levels like
with
this,
the Guiding
though.
Lands,
That
because
needs
you
to be
you
done
have
by
a taste
hunting.
of something
I
that
find these
is similar but better. Wilds kind of does that too.
1 or 2 level tempered monsters. Locking your regions
Because what I was coming to realize with the Guiding Lands was effectively a novelty. It really was. Because, like, yeah, no, it proclaims itself to be this whole thing where you have like every monster in the game effectively, and you're running around like, oh, I can fight this guy and I can fight that guy, and this guy and that guy. But if you're really grinding, like you're really getting at it, what are you doing? You're fighting stuff, you're getting materials, you're getting rewards, whatever. You're trading those into Namiel lures. You get the coral system leveled up. You get like the forest leveled up, so that you also have non-tempered Zenogre, I think. And then it's like you're just going for those.
Things like the leveling system for the Guiding Lands, how you can only have so many regions at max level, how having a region at a set level alters the spawn.
And it really, it's interesting. Like the Guiding Lands banks its identity the most on being a free-for-all, hunt everything in the game, go nuts, go bananas, have fun. And yet, in comparison to the games that came after, it's honestly a good bit weaker in doing that and providing that actual experience.
Improve the weapon statistics beyond what its upgrade tree.
And that's why I think it's fair to bring in Sunbreak, honestly. Because, like, let's actually look at a system that does allow for
affinity or elemental
you to go after a whole bunch of targets and have more generalized material VAT systems and all that kind of stuff. Like, I think that's perfectly fair.
Instead of sheathing to heal with an item. Every augment takes up a certain amount of slots, and you can use Guiding Lands materials to increase the amount of slots that you have access to. The way things are set up, weapons of the same rarity have the exact same material costs.
I just saw a comment saying, world's a big testing ground for a lot of stuff, a lot of great ideas that are poorly executed. Yeah, it's interesting to think about Monster Hunter in general. I think Monster Hunter as a series has kind of been doing that forever. And Monster Hunter has been iterating it on itself and growing on itself and like introducing a thing here and then working at it there and then introducing another thing and then working on that old thing and then reinterpreting that old thing and then moving around and pushing that piece. Monster Hunter has been almost kind of a perpetual tech demo for about 20 years. World, I think, is probably the worst offender of this, or at least the greatest offender of this idea, and the one that probably suffers the most from it, and probably the one where you just like bump into the biggest amount of issues because they tried so many things, and unfortunately they become rather cannibalistic, where you also have a game like Rise and Sunbreak that is very experimental, throws a ton of new stuff at the wall, but a big thing for me is that game is substantially less cannibalistic in how its mechanics operate with one another. Like
those health augments on virtually every single rarity 12 weapon that you're going to be augmenting, you are going to be fighting a lot of tempered Namiel and regular Zenogre. I know that Sunbreak came out after Iceborne, but I think it's worth doing a little bit of a comparison. Yes, in Sunbreak's endgame, augmenting weapons also needed some parts for specific monsters to get the higher tier augments. I think some specific item requirements like this are sensible because the developers don't want you to only grinding the easiest monsters over and over and over to mass produce resources. But the nice thing about Sunbreak is that a good chunk of the cost of the weapon augments, and I think pretty much the entire cost of the charm system, was any afflicted part that you want. Whatever you have in excess stock,
VAT system, my beloved. Honestly,
some specific costs to ensure
I've come to learn like that's how I want to do it. You want to do you want to have like really expensive end game upgrade systems. Like, all right, cool. Do the VAT system. Make it so that I can just dump a fuck ton of stuff in there, and then just like generalize my reward pools so that I can get a whole good amount of mileage out of basically any fight that I do. That I can fight effectively anything in the game, so long as it's probably tempered or end game level, and I won't get punished for it. At least not that bad. I love the VAT upgrade systems, which is something that this game just does not have. It's all very specific. And it's all very repetitive. Like, I feel like the Guiding Lands could have solved a lot of its issues if the augments were maybe a little bit more more differentiated and maybe a bit more related to the monster you were building the weapon off of. Granted, that has some limitations and some stuff wasn't in the Guiding Lands, but like a little bit more something. The fact that like every single rare 8 weapon in the game needed tempered Namiel parts to be able to get the health regen is like, well, now that's all I'm hunting is tempered Namiel and the Guiding Lands. Because, like, I have multiple rarity 8 weapons I want to be able to get up to that functionality. So, like, I guess it's what we're doing.
Layered gear
I
and
don't know.
lure to go make other stuff and fight other monsters with. It's this big whirling cycle of free hunting and recycling over
Gonna stand
and
up and
over
stretch
and
again.
over and over without the hassle of endlessly loading into and out of quests. But if you really want to get the best upgrades for the best weapons, that free hunting is an active detriment to your progress. You need to focus on a select group.
This is
kind of
like the clutch claw
over and
for
over
me,
and over and
where
over. If you have any hope of getting
the more I
multiple
thought
weapons
about
in
it,
tip
and the
top
more
shape,
I analyzed it, and the
chiefly
more I'm like,
blame the
well,
fact
how
that
does
the
this
developers didn't
actually
think to price the weapon
operate with the
augments in a
game
way that
itself?
incentivized
As
hunting
the more
multiple
and more
monsters,
and more, I
the
was like,
issues with the
ah,
Guiding
man,
Lands
this
as a
is
whole. If it
this
wasn't
isn't
for
well
the fact
designed,
that you
unfortunately.
constantly need to hunt
That
the same
sucks, 'cause,
monsters
like,
with the same augments, then I don't
I
think the
wanted
Guiding
to
Lands would have
really like the
needed
Guiding
its
Lands.
convoluted
I've
leveling
had a lot of
system and
fun
all of its
here,
caveats and
obviously.
control options.
It is
I
a
believe
fun
overspecified
region.
augment material
It is a
costs
cool
result
idea,
in a domino
but
effect
it's
of
really
mechanical
the promise
sludge
is a
that
little
may
bit
be
shallow,
chore to manage,
unfortunately.
especially if you play solo. I'd suggest a few ways to make the system better, but as I was saying earlier, they kinda already did it. Sunbreak makes endgame fun.
Right, that almost, honestly, that is, I would say, kind of some of the fun in an analysis, so long as you don't make what you're analyzing into too much of a sacred cow for yourself. You know, if you can kind of remove yourself from it a little bit and take yourself out of it and be like, okay, well, I don't need to hate this product that I like just because I found flaws with that. I don't think there's no one in their right mind would be like, oh, you found issues with that? Well, that means you have to not like it anymore. No, I still adore this game. There was some stuff where like I was a little bit disappointed to find. Like, man, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that I just don't think is incredibly well designed. But at the same time,
really sick idea, and
it does give me a little bit more appreciation for some of the older games that were better designed. It gives me a little bit more appreciation. It almost gives me a little bit more appreciation for the game itself, because, like, not so much because I think it's better. I do think it does struggle under scrutiny, but at the same time, it was fun to go this deep into it and to really try to legitimately think about the game and take it seriously and just kind of have unemotional is the wrong term for it, and unbiased would be the wrong term for it, but it's more so of unbiased. It's trying to be. I don't even want to say pragmatic necessarily, but taking a look at it in terms of, I don't know exactly what word I would use for it. It's not unemotional. Unbiased would probably be the right word for it. Like looking at something you love in a way that is unbiased and really trying to go deep into it and really trying to be like really trying to see how it ticks and how it works and how it operates. I do think you actually kind of come upon having a higher appreciation for it a little bit, unless it's really bad. Because like sometimes if you hold something up under scrutiny, you're like, wow, no, this is actually like pretty fucking terrible. Holy shit. But I don't know, even with something that is very mixed and very flawed and dare I say on an objective level a bit mid, like Monster Hunter World would be, there is almost this kind of like, well, I put this much work and this much passion and this much thought into this game. Clearly, I have some degree of passion for it, some high degree of passion for it, and subjectively, I really like it, so I don't know, there's ways in which actually going into this level of analytics and this kind of deep diving and being this critical of it almost makes me appreciate it or just have like a little bit more of a special relationship with it, just because I've been with it on this level of intimacy. I think that's something that can be very valuable about hyper-analytical, very long form, very deep criticism that some people kind of glaze over is like there is a kind of level of intimacy with the product and also with the art form itself that you're looking into, both the art form of game design and the art form of like filmmaking and the art form of criticism in itself, where once you kind of bring yourself into that level and go into that place and go looking for that level of depth. I do think it kind of brings you a little bit more in touch with that art form. I do think it brings you a little bit more in touch with what you're analyzing. And I don't know, I feel like sometimes we live in a little bit of there's a part of culture currently, like the let people enjoy things type of thing. I'm like, yeah, sure, obviously, but also like let people dislike things, or let people be critical of things. You know, not everybody who's trying to put out a deep criticism is aiming that criticism at the fans of the things that they are criticizing. You know, I think there's some people who really kind of just don't want to engage with media on a hyper deep level. You know, they think that it gets too pedantic, it gets too nitpicky, which nitpicky is a very abused word that I don't think gets used properly, unfortunately. There's a lot of people who get very wary of analysis that goes like this level of depth and trying to think about it on this kind of level. I don't really, I don't know. I think that when you allow yourself to kind of go into this place, you find yourself just really like, you do it because you really like the medium. So let's talk about like, I really like video games. I really like Monster Hunter. I really like criticism. I do this, and I made a 10.5-hour video because I really like all of these. And I had a lot of negative things to say about World and Iceborne. But doing all this and being on that analytical level, it really didn't kill my love and my appreciation for it at all. It just made my objective score for the game go down. Which are potentially comparable in power to some of the best weapons that the game has to offer. And having my objective score of a game go down, it didn't really hurt my perception of it and what it means to me. And what it, I feel like that's kind of something that some people are afraid of. Like, you go to that level of depth, then like you kind of erase a level of enjoyment. You erase a level of meaning. You kind of boil it down to pure pragmatism. And I can tell from firsthand experience that it's really not the case. I really haven't ruined my appreciation or my passion for any of these things for the levels of dissection that I go into. Much better, and most weapons have a solid option that I think it's fun. I really think it's fun. It's for this reason that it might just make it so that an objective number will go down. But the other thing, the other kind of turnaround is when you go into something that's a little bit more mid, or maybe something that's a bit more mixed to even maybe bad, which I don't think there really is a Monster Hunter game I'd call bad at all. When you are able to engage with an art medium on that level of analysis, when you find something that is actually legitimately good, you appreciate that on a whole other level. And that's about it. His RNG comes down, you know, I was talking about at the beginning, I was talking about the fact that, like, a big part of me wanting to do this tonight was an infatuation with, like, Lord of the Rings and the behind-the-scenes type of things. And, like, I mean, those movies just, they hold up, and they hold up, and they hold up, and they're so good. And it's, the more you look into them and the more detailing and everything, you actually do kind of pop into a couple of issues that they might have, but you also find there's just more stuff to like and more stuff to like and more stuff to like the more you go into them. And like, when you find that stuff that's actually like legitimately, verifiably really good on levels that are provable on an objective level, man, you really start to appreciate them a lot. I barely even been talking about the Siege stuff that we've been talking about. I don't know if I had anything necessarily super interesting to say in terms of script writing for the Siege mechanics. The Siege mechanics, I mean, they are what they are. I don't think I really need to reiterate too much of what I was going into right here. I didn't have too much to add to this. I feel like I didn't really come to any grand revelations while writing this section either. Had to reset the potential table to finally get it. So, Savi's weapons are usually pretty nice, but not
all the time.
I will say,
will in your favor, which makes it much better constructed.
We definitely have had a
Roth's
bit of a
RNG,
step down
even though Safi's
between
weapons are
the Safi weapons and the GOG
Also,
Mazios weapons
Safi
in certain
weapons, at least with
respects.
Iceborne completed, do not
In
make
certain
for the best
respects,
weapons in the
unfortunately.
game. They are competitive with Fatalis and Raging Brachydios for potential raw damage, and they are competitive with Call to Roth and some other monsters for elements, depending on how you want to build your weapons. But with the Safi weapons,
Did I have
you don't
anything
to
super
put in
interesting?
a ton of grinding and suffer through a ton of RNG to get weapons that are clearly far and away better than everything else in the game. That's not an issue with these weapons. So Safi's weapons are at their best when they're experimenting with niche and otherwise impossible set bonus combos. Their biggest issue is that investing into any one Safi Jiva weapon is fairly expensive on your Draco-like.
I think I was talking mostly about the different cushions that the siege weapons have.
It's gonna take you a couple of
Like the
months
Clove
to
ones
get
are the most
all of those
random,
weapons
but at the
where you
same
want
time, them being the most
With
random,
Clove,
you get them
your
and then
weapon,
you're kind of done with them
nothing
beyond just the
that.
upgrades,
There's
like
just
pretty
no
clean,
control behind
pretty
what
quick
it
and clean.
I like the sieges
Whereas the
overall.
Safi ones,
RNG
there's way more
doesn't
control in what
particularly
you
bother
actually
that much
get, but
because
then you
even if I
actually
really
need to
wanted
do
to match
the
my
lottery
armor
shit.
sets, then yeah, the Call to
Which
Roth
can
RNG
be
is
really
a bit
nice to
annoying,
you.
But there's almost always going to be an
Sometimes it's not.
if maybe slightly
Again, if you
worse
were watching the
replacements
live
for pretty much
streams,
all of her weapons.
you
In most
would
cases,
have an
you
idea
don't
of the
need
pain
Call
and
to
misery
Roth
and
for
suffering that
these
was trying to get the
elements
Teostra
viable,
technique
but she will
on
often give you a
the
slight
hunting horn that I wanted to
advantage.
use in the lead up
Safi
to going
needs
in
a
after
fair bit of investment,
Fatalis.
but the RNG will usually swing
That was
in
a
favor,
pain in
and
the
it's better
dick.
for making unique sets than it is for making the best gear in the game. We're not talking about this aspect yet, but I also really enjoy both of the fights. Say for Phase 1 Call to Roth. I like mechanics in Monster Hunter that are built around multiplayer, teamwork, and huge spectacle, though I do think the single-player versions of these fights took way too long to show up. I find the battles enjoyable to run several times in a row. If sieges ever do come back, I don't think they need to change the reward system too far from how Safi's was executed. I get
Yeah, I
having
think
some
GOG changed
RNG
things in
to
a couple
promote
of bad
several
ways,
runs on the
unfortunately.
raid, but they should keep it so that the RNG works with you so that you're not wasting time on runs that give you nothing that you want. I think
I can
Safi
just kinda
Jiva's
let this
specific
run, I
raid
think, for
does
a second,
pretty
unless
good
something
job
comes
of
up that
still
I can
having
think
a
of.
kind of MMO raid boss RNG
I'll read chat
type
for
of
a second.
system, while still fitting in with Monster Hunter's ability to reward you with specifics for what you're going for and still respecting your time, better than Call to Roth's completely random table.
I don't know if I would say
great
Safi
memories
Jiva
of running both of
respects
these
your
raids
time.
with fans and with friends,
In certain
and
respects,
I'm
but not
super
in
happy
not
that
in
they were
others.
implemented. There's some imperfections, but I genuinely enjoy both of these inclusions to Monster Hunter. Before we wrap things up with the game's mechanics, I'm going to go over a couple more general game features that will not be getting their own timestamps.
All right, looks like we've hit the etc. section
So,
before we go over the
in all of that,
analytical analysis.
What do I think of Monster Hunter World Iceborne objectively as a video game with mechanics and all that goodness? Analytically, what do I think? The game's a little bit rough around the edges, that's for sure. There are definitely a lot of growing pains here. I wanted to be as objective and as honest as I could with a game that I love. And the reality is, this game has issues, like big issues. Issues with cushions. Issues I can forgive in a few places.
All right, so
issues
just going
that
into-
I sometimes don't interact with. Issues that may not bother me or you or whoever a ton. But, you know, they're there. I don't think that means that the game's bad. Not at
Did I
all.
not have
Honestly,
the
I think
etc.
it's
things in the full release? Oh wow,
probably
so the
one
full
of
release
the
have been
most
actually
flawed
longer.
Monster Hunter games
Huh.
out there. It has some
I'm just
comfort
noticing that
options
now.
I don't really like. It's got mechanics that I think
I think we're just going into the
well
objective
to avoid
overview thing now.
cannibalization. I think the end
I think
game is
some of
a
the,
complicated mess.
I mean, honestly,
The
that section was
RPG
only like an extra
decorations
2
are
minutes,
really
maybe.
annoying. I think there's a bit too much MMO FOMO in here. I believe that all of that's true. I believe that all of that's valid. World and Iceborne, still awesome. And, you know, like I said in my thesis.
Yeah, I
a big
still
part of
hang-
that
still
is
stand
because
by that.
this
The game is still
Monster Hunter.
awesome.
And, you know, that's not a statement that I make in the name of blind brand loyalty. These games are so damn solid in terms of loop, boss design, gameplay, and weaponry that a lot of these big issues that I meticulously broke down can sometimes just not do a ton to inhibit my enjoyment of the game. Yeah, sure, the Temporal and Rocksteady Mantle are really brain dead, but yeah, I try not to use them all the time, and, you know, when they're over and done with, I just go back to playing normally. Yeah, I don't really like that I can go replace my Mega Potions all the time, but I don't go for that restock that often, and yeah, I still get a ton of satisfaction from the game's challenging fights. Yeah, Guiding Land's way too complicated, but the game doesn't really ask you to min-max the augments that much. You know, I just try to be honest with everything. Point out the pros and the cons where I saw them. Still, big fan. I just have some issues with the game. Pretty proud of my analysis of the gameplay mechanics of this, actually. And coming up
Let's see.
is going to be
is
the
there
part of the
anything
video
to
where I
talk
just
about kind of
lay
closing things
forever
out
everything
here?
about this game. This is the culmination
I will say
of
with the
mechanical
objective
and
analysis bit at the end,
analysis. Rather than
it
just
was a
having the
redraft,
analysis
and I
of
wish I
the
redrafted
monsters,
it
the
again.
weapons,
It
and all
is
that stuff. It's
not
still
where
gonna
I
be
wanted it
levels
to
up,
be
and it's not
when
just
I was
gonna be
talking about the
pretty
comparison,
nice, but
especially at the very,
if
very end,
you wanted
going
my
over and talking
review
about
of Monster Hunter World
Sunbreak
Iceborne,
versus
yeah, this
Iceborne
whole
and then
section,
trying to
this first
substantiate
part,
it.
that's
So
it.
I
We're
am
gonna
not
move on to the more fun stuff.
thrilled with,
But, you know, here's a really interesting question. Which
yeah, no, I thought that this would be fun. I thought that this would be a fun little section where I was like, ooh, what do I think is better, Sunbreak or Iceborne? Sunbreak or Ice? Yeah, Sunbreak or Iceborne.
So
Hang on.
where do
Yes,
I
yes, those are the names. I got the
First of
sleepiness
all,
in my head again. I'm like,
subject.
did I flip
like
around the
Iceborne
words
better.
again? Like, no, I didn't say Icebreak and Sunborn. No.
Really
But yeah, no, I
enjoy
thought this would be
the
really fun. I thought it would be
over-the-top
fun to like,
gameplay
what do I like better? Because I never really got in on this whole fucking war. Like, even people who weren't really like anti-other game kind of got into the whole like Rise versus World discussion. I never did. I never found it like hyper interesting, and I thought like a whole bunch of the criticisms and argumentation back and forth between the two were kind of mean-spirited and can occasionally be in bad faith. So I'm like, this could be really fun to like take a look at, and it would also be really fun because like I kind of think Sunbreak's a better game, and it would be kind of fun and funny and also a little bold in Iceborne's game to then be like, no, but I think like Sunbreak's actually a little bit better.
Could have put in more, honestly.
Honestly, I was kind of thinking it was going to be a little bit more controversial than it actually was. Not a lot of people got on my ass about it. My whole thing really is I didn't really. I don't know. I was just trying to get through this section, and I made a whole bunch of claims that I think like Sunbreak does this, and this better than I think Iceborne does it, and I didn't really substantiate it in this all that much of the slightest. It kind of like goes off this assumption that you've watched both of these videos. And like, I don't even know if all of the points that I threw together really stand up against each other. I don't know. I still do. The biggest thing for me is like the more and more I've played Sunbreak, the more I've thought about Sunbreak, the more I have thought about it analytically, the more I've done it. Sunbreak has really only gotten better in my perception and in my opinion and in my subjective view and also in like an analytical view, whereas Iceborne has really only gotten a bit weaker as time has gone on as far as I'm concerned and as much as I've looked at it and analyzed it and whatnot. And I still think I enjoy Iceborne a bit more, honestly. It definitely means more to me. But personally, that one is I think I'd still stand by the fact that I think Sunbreak is the better game, but I do not think I did a good job substantiating that in this video. And again, I am not making a statement. I would do this again. What I am glad I did is I did some clarification regarding objective analysis and objective assessment, because a lot of people, I think, get confused when you're trying to make an objective assessment and trying to say that, like, my opinion is true because it's objective. It's like, no, I tried to use a system of facts to go after a point to make a subjective conclusion, but root it in a whole bunch of objectively verifiable facts. And I wish I did a better job actually trying to substantiate the use of objective facts that I used to match the two games up against one another. I think I could have done a much better job. And if I actually tackle this question again, I will do a much better. It'll probably have to be like its own thing, honestly, because really trying to go and compare the two games on analytical levels and subjective levels would probably be too long of a tangent for it to fit in something like this. And Iceborne handled it. Sunbreak also provides a substantially less vague numerical information in-game regarding monster hit zone. Yeah, now we're just kind of like going down some of the information. I'd have to like look back over at some of the points that I make and see if I even agree with them anymore. And there's also just no for the most part, I think I probably do. Though at the same time, I think I probably could have explained some things a little bit better. I think this section is. I still kind of stand by what I say. but I think this bit is a little
I just think
weak.
that, you know, Sunbreak managed to
A little
power through
weak.
some of Iceborne's growing
I
pains
do
and
still
improve
think I've
couple of areas, but I
communicated
think that Iceborne
what I
is
wanted to
better.
communicate well
Now,
enough, but it's
are you ready
it's
for a
comparing
few
and contrasting
more
two
hours
games when
where
the
I
video
mostly just
only
gush
analyzed
about how
one of
awesome
them.
this game is?
And
That's gonna be
I
the next
don't
couple
think
parts
that
of
can
this
make for
video.
the for
We
it
still
being
got
like
a
the best thing.
long ride ahead of us with this.
Maybe I would have even like not included this if I was to really
Alright.
revise it. All right, and that is part 1 of a celebration and critique of Monster Hunter World director's commentary. I don't think I'm going to be doing part 2 and part 3. I was starting to run out of things to say in part 1, which was the much more interesting one to go over. So I don't think I'm going to have enough to really talk about the remaining 8 hours. But I'm glad I did this. I'm glad I gave this a shot. This was really, really fun, I think. I had a lot of fun doing this.